Chapter 424. Today, I have a piece of unfortunate news to tell everyone. At this moment, many people on Earth were watching Li Onping on TV. It was not just the TV. Just like last time, cell phone screens, LED screens, computer screens, all the screens were broadcasting Li Onping's speech. However, this time, no one complained. Instead, they all listened attentively. Earth is facing a disaster. In 5 months, an otherworldly creature called the Devil will come to our universe, our solar system. The screen began to play videos of Ash, Hygrum, Febrizo, and various other monsters. These videos were edited together to highlight their strength and cruelty. These devils come from a place called the Land of White. As you can see, their favorite food is us humans. We only have 2 choices. Either we are eaten or we are eaten. This is not a joke. The entire Earth has reached a moment of life and death. Li Onping was silent for a while, as if he was letting the viewers in front of the TV digest this shocking fact. Countless people in front of the TV opened their mouths and stared at Li Onping on the TV. It was as if they could not accept Li Onping's words for a while. However, the videos of Ash, Hygrum, Febrizo, and other monsters that were constantly replaying in the corner of the TV screen, as well as the weight of Li Onping's name itself, forced them to accept this hard-to-accept reality. The devil is very strong, so if we want to fight against them, we have to make ourselves stronger. Whether it's weapons, superpowers, secret martial arts, or magic, I will provide you with all of them. If you want to survive, work hard to make yourself stronger, whether it is your mind or your body. Li Onping opened his hands. His words began to exude a strange temptation. We are humans. We should be the masters of the universe. We should be the gods of all other creatures. Whether it is extraterrestrial life, otherworldly life, devils, or gods, they can only be trampled under our feet and run according to our wishes. Zoos, dissecting rooms, nature reserves. This is where they should go. Humans are the masters of all things. My brethren, I will give all of you a chance to obtain power as great as God's. What you need to do is to defeat, tear, crush, and devour the demons when they appear. Along with Li Onping's words, a wave of boiling emotions gradually spread through the profound web. It was obviously just a few words, but all the people in front of the TV screen became excited. It was as if adrenaline had sped up. Comrades, we are humans. We are the greatest race in the universe. I want you to spread my will to the ends of space-time and spread my power to every corner of the universe. The entire universe should revolve for us. Roar! All the humans in front of the TV screen felt as if a ball of flames was burning in their chests. Strong emotions burned their nerves. Regardless of whether they were otakus, rice bugs, old people, or passive people, at this moment, they seemed to have turned into berserk warriors who dared to fight against the heavens and the earth. Li Onping slowly closed his eyes. It was as if he could sense every single cell in his body. He could sense the boiling emotions of all the humans on Earth. These flame-like emotions gathered in his heart, making him feel unprecedentedly comfortable. It was as if he had put down a huge burden. All sorts of unnecessary conflicts, desires, and evil thoughts were reduced at this moment. Everyone's thoughts became extremely close and pure. At the next moment, he opened his eyes, and a bright light flashed in his pupils. The new functions of the profound web had been downloaded to the terminals of every human on Earth like a waterfall. He then started to introduce the new functions of the profound web on the TV. From this day onward, everyone would be able to use the omnipresent nanoworms, as well as the computing power of the 10 quantum computers into Xiaolong K-base by spending the electronic currency in their accounts. Through this process, they would be able to realize the various physical phenomena that Li Onping had stored in the profound web, such as various superpowers and magic. However, superpowers and magic of different levels would obviously depend on the applicant's authority to use them. Everyone's authority would be based on their identity, position, and most importantly, their importance to the Earth's government. There were a total of over 20 levels. Each application would take a few microseconds for Li Onping to approve. This process was equivalent to turning all the humans on Earth into ability users, as long as they were on Earth. Of course, this was only a foundation. Li Onping's greater goal was to make every human on Earth stronger mentally and physically. Everyone would be able to use their computing power and nanoworms. They would also be able to flip through the various magic and martial arts secret manuals that Li Onping had stored in the profound web. Li Onping had even included the first stage of the electromagnetic drive. However, he did not think that anyone would be able to successfully cultivate it. After all, the borrowed computing power was only borrowed. Once they left Earth, they would no longer be able to borrow it. Even if they could cultivate the electromagnetic drive on Earth, they would have nothing once they left Earth. Therefore, the greatest help that the profound web provided to the humans was still the ability to cultivate on their own. He had turned every human on Earth into a genius among geniuses. As long as you work hard enough, you would definitely be able to become a powerhouse. Of course, reading through all kinds of information also required various kinds of authority and electronic currency. If one wanted to obtain more electronic currency and authority, they would need to make greater contributions and shoulder greater responsibilities for humanity. For example, joining the army, joining the Royal Academy of Sciences, or going on adventures in the universe and the land of white to collect all kinds of information. In short, the greater the contribution to humanity, the more electronic currency and authority one would be able to obtain. While electronic currency could be traded with each other, authority could not. At the same time, from this day onwards, all the humans who were connected to the profound web were slowly and imperceptibly influenced by Li Onping. It was just like how the doctor used various kinds of external information to influence Xia Yunyun's judgment. The profound web's mental and emotional stimulation slowly made every human on Earth more positive, more intelligent, and more rational than before. Low-level and meaningless quarrels, curses, and all kinds of conflicts started to decrease on the profound web. It was as if everyone's quality was slowly improving. They placed their attention on the profound web. It was not just the various cultivation functions. Li Onping also opened up a lot of information about the multiverse and the land of white. He also encouraged all the humans on Earth to apply to leave Earth after they had obtained great power and equipment to conquer new worlds. However, it was obvious that such things were still very far away for the current humans. Right now, the humans on Earth had just taken the first step. Immediately after the profound web was further opened up, the entire structure of the Earth's government would be adjusted. Most of the government personnel, especially those at the front desk who could be replaced by machines, would be replaced by machines. Nominally, the government would use machines and the internet to replace all the repetitive work through electronic work. However, in reality, all the machines and the internet were a part of Li Onping. He had replaced all the government personnel by himself and accurately planned the work of the entire Earth's government. Right now, most of the higher-ups who were still working in the government could only be like Wang Chong, helping Li Onping to perfect some details and fill in the gaps. Right now, most of their energy was invested into the profound web, as well as various cultivation and research, just like most of the people. Next, Li Onping gradually opened up the character exchange function and target exchange function. He even allowed people to freely change their preferences. There was no need to talk about the various objections and protests that broke out. From the beginning to the end, Li Onping had personally suppressed Earth. Even if he did not do anything, the voices of resistance would only gradually weaken as time passed. As more and more people changed their characters and hobbies, turning themselves into the kind of people they wanted to be, the number of people who objected to this function of the profound web also decreased. Some of the die-hard supporters of the profound web also came up with a thought. They believed that in this society, humans would definitely be stimulated by various kinds of information, such as reading books, watching movies, and talking. Such actions would definitely change one's inner thoughts and character. There are also things like family, school, and colleagues that would change one's character and hobbies. However, the profound web only sped up this process and gave humans the right to choose. It allowed everyone to be who they wanted to be and do what they wanted to do, instead of being passively influenced by the environment and oppressed by society, forcing them to be another version of themselves. Of course, Lianping only provided the exchange function that complemented society's moral standards. There were many people among humans who liked to kill, do evil, and bully their own people. They would not be able to get the exchange function they wanted. However, since these people did not talk about human rights with others, Li Onping would naturally not talk about human rights with them either. He directly changed all of them. Just thinking about it had directly changed his mind. As for those that had already been done and then stopped by Li Onping, they naturally became air molecules. Within a month's time, everyone on Earth was able to mobilize all sorts of nano-worms and computational abilities. It was just that the majority of them cultivated magic and secret martial arts. Another 2 months passed, which was the 3rd month, and Li Onping personally set up a spatial gate that covered all the planets in the entire solar system. Humans had completely taken over the solar system. Simultaneously, 100 Martian cities rose up from the ground. Humans started to modify the Martian atmosphere, creating a confluence of the oceans, allowing Mars to adapt to human survival and expanding their strategic depth. By the 4th month, the world-crossing gate in the White Land was surrounded by countless war fortresses. The area within a range of 10,000 kilometers was covered by alloy armor that was over 200 meters tall and over 50 meters tall. The fully automatic fire control system at the top of the armor, together with robot troops and human warriors wearing interstellar armors, kept the various native creatures of the White Land at the door. Until today, there were only 7 days left before the arrival of the evil god tribe's warriors, which was also the 5th month. Chapter 425. On the White Land, Li Onping looked at the endless stretch of White Land and communicated with Bai Xinghe. I've already activated those things. With them around, there shouldn't be any danger on Earth. Bai Xinghe asked if there's any danger. Quantum communication makes use of the principle of non-locality in entangled states. Through the particle states that I prepared on Earth, you guys should be able to contact me at any time. Li Onping said calmly, if you can't contact me, then use your own judgment to decide how to use the things that I've set up. Understood. All right, I'll be leaving. After saying this, Li Onping turned into a stream of light and headed toward the number 1 crossing gate, which was the northern location of the crossing gate that led to the solar system. According to the map provided by the Tides of Chaos, the entire White Land was vast and boundless, and it was still expanding with every passing moment. The number 1 crossing gate was located in the southernmost part of the White Land. As the earliest native race to appear in the White Land, the evil god tribe's main territory was naturally located in the center of the White Land. It was unknown how long it would take to reach the number 1 crossing gate in the southernmost part of the White Land. They traveled long distances using something known as the Red River. Despite this, it would still take a very long time to reach the number 1 crossing gate from the evil god tribe's territory. One of the places that they would have to pass through was Li Onping's current destination, an evil god tribe stronghold. As the border of the White Land, this place had never received the attention of various high-level demons. The evil god tribe stronghold here had only been managed by a few lower-level demons who were not from the evil god tribe. If it was not because Hygrim was too weak among the princes, he would not have been chased here. A few hours later, a walled city that was constructed from white soil and rocks appeared before Li Onping. Before he got close, an overwhelming stench gushed toward him. Li Onping flew to the top of the walled city and looked down. The entire walled city looked like countless garbage dumps that had been piled up without any pattern. Several hundred strange-looking creatures were left in the walled city, looking at Li Onping in astonishment. It's a human. He must have escaped from the crossing gate. Catch him. At the next second, several tens of creatures that looked like bats flapped their wings and soared into the sky. Seeing how bloodthirsty and excited they were, Li Onping merely threw a cold glance at them. At the next moment, these demons exploded into blood splatters in the sky, spraying down a rain of blood. At this moment, all the demons in the entire stronghold were alarmed. Some roared and rushed forward, some carefully retreated, and some carefully observed Li Onping in the sky. No one knew what they were thinking. These demons had no concept of an army or discipline, of the evil god tribe. As more and more blood splattered in the sky, not a single demon was able to get within 100 meters of Li Onping. When the remaining demons saw this situation, they stopped charging and scattered in all directions. Their battle wills were even worse than what Li Onping had imagined. Seeing this situation, Li Onping also found it a little strange. Although the inferior demons at the borders of this white land should be the cannon fodder soldiers of the entire evil god tribe, they were still ridiculously weak. On average, they were only at the 4th energy level, and there was not a single one at the 5th energy level. A few minutes later, Li Onping finally understood what was going on. He wiped off the traces of blood at the corners of his lips, sensed the information in the other party's brain, and mumbled, "You guys discovered a new crossing gate?" "Why, yes," a demon that looked like a rock said in a trembling voice. Looking at the over 10 headless corpses at Li Onping's feet, he became even more terrified. He had just seen with his own eyes how this human bit open the heads of over 10 demons like he was eating snacks. Li Onping nodded. According to the memories he had read, the demons here had recently discovered a new crossing gate and discovered the existence of humans there. Therefore, the person in charge of this walled city, as well as the strongest expert, the level 5 demon Zeitons, had already led over 1,000 of the most elite demons to the newly discovered crossing gate. This was also their job here. Just like on Earth, the demons in the stronghold here would constantly send out groups of 2 to 3 demons to search for crossing gates in the surroundings of the stronghold. However, most of the crossing gates were usually connected to barren worlds where life could not exist. Once they discovered a world with rich resources, civilization, or even humans, Zeitons would bring a large number of troops over to enjoy, or rather destroy, the place. Back then, when Hygrim forcibly took over Earth's crossing gate and then disappeared, Zeitons had the intention to gloat. Of course, he would not rush over to a world where even Hygrim did not return. However, after reporting the situation, he quietly waited for the superior warriors of the evil god tribe to investigate this matter. During this period of time, his subordinates had been searching for new crossing gates and had even found another human world, which made him very happy. And it was not only him. The level 8 evil god tribe warriors who had arrived today also rushed over after knowing that Zeitons had discovered a new human world. They said that they wanted to have fun there before looking for Hygrim. Obviously, to him, having fun in that world was much more important than investigating Hygrim's disappearance. After all, devouring humans was the nature of almost all demons, and a world where they could freely devour humans was very rare. As for those left in the walled city, they were naturally some old and weak soldiers who were not qualified to follow. After knowing this, Li Onping had seen the chaos and depravity of the demons, or rather, the evil god tribe. He looked at the trembling demons in front of him and pointed with a finger, turning them all into dust that could not be seen with the naked eye. At this moment, there were no longer any demons left in the walled city. Next, Li Onping directly walked to the side of a huge blood pool. This blood pool in the center of the walled city was the so-called Red River. Through it, the evil god tribe could cross a long distance and quickly reach any stronghold that was derived from the Red River. Looking at the blood pool under his feet, Li Onping clenched his hand slightly toward the corpse of a demon. That demon, who was originally completely dead, hurriedly stood up and shook his head, as if he was getting used to his corpse. With Li Onping's current strength, this kind of magic that could animate corpses was completely at his fingertips. In addition, he could program consciousness algorithms. Corpses like this that had been resurrected far surpassed the so-called zombies. Not only were they controlled by their instincts, but they also had the ability to talk, remember, and so on. It was as if they had been resurrected. Li Onping instructed him, "Watch this place. If anyone comes out, tell them that I attacked this place and that I want to look for Zeitons." "Understood." Seeing that the corpse nodded, Li Onping flashed in the next moment and completely disappeared. He had already left a particle state on the corpse. Due to the non-local nature of quantum theory, the connection between two particle states could not be explained by classical information. Therefore, no matter how far away he was, he would be able to know if there was a problem with this corpse. The crossing gate this time was only about 180 million kilometers away from the walled city. It was much closer than the first crossing gate. Obviously, this was also the reason why the Level 8 warrior had prioritized looking for Zitans. 10 minutes later, Li Onping, who had turned into a ray of light, entered the crossing gate. The crossing gate was located on a wide road. When Li Onping passed through the crossing gate, what greeted his eyes was a city that looked like the end of the world. Tall buildings had turned into ruins, and the ground was split and shattered. Hundreds of thousands of monsters roamed the city, tearing every human that appeared in front of them into pieces. From time to time, some fighter jets and bombers flew over the city. However, they were quickly hit by all kinds of rays, flames, and even stones, turning into huge fireballs that fell from the sky. This was a human world that was somewhat similar to Earth. It had also entered a modern civilization. But now, because of the invasion of demons, it had turned into hell. As soon as Li Onping appeared outside the crossing gate, he obviously attracted the attention of the nearby demons. These demons were all left behind to guard the crossing gate. Li Onping's human appearance caused more than 10 demons to pounce on him as soon as he appeared. These demons were still chewing on the flesh in their hands just a moment ago. Some broken human limbs were scattered on the ground just like that. When they rushed toward Li Onping could even clearly see the human fingers in their mouths, the eyeballs in their hands, and the blood all over their bodies. He frowned, and a blue electric light turned into an arc of light that shot out from his body. All the nearby demons were instantly vaporized by the terrifying heat. In a cage made of reinforced concrete, a few men covered in blood stared blankly at the spotless Li Onping. It was hard to imagine that the invincible demon in their eyes had been killed so easily. Li Onping glanced at the crude cage. It was clearly built by the demons guarding the crossing gate. As for the reason for building it, it could not be more simple. It was nothing more than to maintain the freshness of the ingredients. Compared to the boredom of the corpses, listening to the screams of humans while tearing their bodies made these demons more excited. The men in the cage looked blonde and had blue eyes, somewhat similar to the people of the Federation. When they saw Li Onping looking over, they immediately shouted and spoke a language that Li Onping had never heard of. However, after scanning their heads slightly, Li Onping already understood everything about them. This was a planet that belonged to humans. The country under Li Onping's feet was called the United States, and the crossing gate was located in a place called Manhattan. Under the invasion of demons, the entire planet had turned into an apocalyptic world. Chapter 426. After obtaining information about Earth from the few of them, Li Onping spoke directly. The moment he spoke in a language that the other party called English. Clearly, he had learned this language easily when he was scanning the other party's memories earlier. Escape to the south. At the next moment, the reinforced concrete around them scattered in all directions. Then, Li Onping waved his hand. Accompanied by a series of tremors, the blue teleportation gate soared into the sky and flew into outer space. Li Onping's body flashed and disappeared like a stream of light. United States Hexagon Building. There were only 2 people in the conference room. One of them was the United States Minister of Defense, Charlie Paulson. He looked at the man with a cynical expression and a devilish smile. He could not help but frown. The man had a pair of amber eyes, yellow skin, and black hair. However, his identity as a mixed blood was revealed. The door to the conference room was pushed open, and a beautiful blonde secretary walked in with a cup of coffee. Charlie Paulson looked at the 2 of them flirting with each other. His secretary's eyes were filled with lust and radiance. He gritted his teeth and said, "Lieutenant General Jack, the president has made up his mind. The 12 nuclear bombs are ready to be deployed. The only problem now is what those astrostars are doing in New York City. We must ascertain if they came from Manhattan." The mixed blood named Jack smiled and took a longing look at the blonde beauty. It was only when Charlie's face had turned pitch black that he reluctantly removed his hand from the blonde secretary's beautiful butt and let her leave. He swirled the coffee cup and said slowly, "Since they're ready, let's just throw them. After all, that place has become a ghost town. It doesn't matter if we throw them at the wrong place." Charlie slammed his fist on the desk and said angrily, "They're going to throw nuclear bombs on our own land. Do you know how much pressure the government will be under? Those B** stars have been in New York for several months, but even today, there are at least over 1 million survivors." Jack did not seem to care about Charlie's tone at all. He said slowly, "Oh, can't the government find out the situation in Manhattan now? God knows what that thing is. The whole of New York is covered in dark clouds, and the satellites can't see anything. We've lost contact with all the reconnaissance teams we've sent in the past few months." Charlie stared at Jack. "Lieutenant General, we need your help. We need you to go to Manhattan in person to understand the situation inside." Jack smiled and pointed to the blonde beauty outside the door and said, "Then let Maria come with me. Also, tell those guys from Woyong to scram. That's my territory, and I don't want others to tell me what to do." Charlie frowned, but in the end, he exhaled and said, "All right." Jack smiled and walked straight out of the conference room door. He picked up the blonde beauty outside the door by her waist, ignoring her screams and struggles, and walked straight out. Charlie snorted. It's best if these monsters all die. There was a Superman in this world, and he was an American. His name was Jack, and he was from Kansas in America. He was so strong that he could push the locomotive. His speed was astonishing, and he could race with cars. He was the American Jack, America's superhero. After the demons took over Manhattan, apart from leaving behind a portion of them to guard the world's crossing gates, most of them spread out across the globe. It was because every demon had the ability to create human monsters in addition to their own abilities. In just a few months' time, the entire world had turned into an apocalyptic world. However, the governments of the various countries did not give up on resisting. Especially with the appearance of the demons, a large number of powerful people who had been hiding appeared one after another. These special people made use of the chaos brought about by the demons to either occupy territories all over the world, or they obtained a piece of territory after joining the government. Most of the governments no longer had enough power to restrain these special people because their armies had been dealt a heavy blow by the demons. They could only allow them to do whatever they wanted. There were even many times when they had to borrow their powers to fight against the demons together. An armored vehicle slowly came to a stop in the suburbs 50 kilometers away from New York City. The driver of the vehicle was a little nervous, but also a little excited as he watched Jack slowly get out of the armored vehicle. He said, "I'm sorry. This is the maximum distance. If you continue to advance, you'll be attacked by those monsters." Jack shrugged nonchalantly and said, "It's fine. Just send me here." He checked his equipment. After making sure that there were no problems, he said calmly, "I'm leaving." Jack squatted down abruptly and then stomped on the ground. With an explosive boom, a huge pit appeared in the ground. He shot up into the sky like a rocket, flying several kilometers away. Then he smashed toward the ground like a meteor. Although he looked like a flea, neither beautiful nor fashionable, with Jack's brute strength supporting him, his speed was actually very fast. In the blink of an eye, he was already close to the New York City area. With a boom, the entire ground trembled. Jack slowly walked out from the small pit he had created. Something's not right. I purposely jumped forward like this. Why didn't those demons attack me? He mumbled to himself. "Black, can you sense their presence?" A voice rang out from Jack's body. "There's a problem. Their auras are very faint. Go to the city and take a look. They might have left. It's best if their boss doesn't stay in there. Otherwise, I'm afraid I'll get rid of him." Jack was indeed confident. Ever since he received help from the mysterious creature that called itself Black, he had the ability to devour human flesh and soul. With this ability, he gradually became the most dazzling hero in the entire United States. He still remembered that the original Jack was just an introverted third-generation immigrant. Be it in school or in the community, he was always bullied by others. He even had the experience of being stripped naked and tied up in the field. However, everything changed that night. From a piece of jade he bought, Black appeared. He gave him the ability to become stronger by devouring humans. That night, he secretly killed the 3 men who had stripped him naked and tied him up in the spectator seats in the field. When he saw the man who had been bullying him kneeling and begging for mercy, that feeling of exhilaration almost made him unable to stop. It also made him understand the meaning of his life. In the following days, Jack hunted for food every night and killed people in the school during the day. He got the cheerleader to be his girlfriend and beat the school's quarterback so badly that he could not take care of himself. However, just when he was at his most high-spirited, the devil appeared. At first, he still had some complaints. However, he soon realized that the devil's appearance was the best opportunity for him. In this doomsday-like world, he could kill without any worries. With his super strength, speed, and regenerative ability, he quickly ruled half of Luo City in the apocalyptic world. He even used his superhuman skills to kill 3 level 4 devils that even the United States military could not do anything about. Therefore, after the United States higher-ups paid countless money, resources, and beautiful women, they recruited Jack and made him into America's Superman, a world hero, to boost morale and fight against the devils. However, it was obvious that for a monster like him, the apocalypse was the most advantageous. Therefore, after he killed a few level 4 devils and confirmed his superhuman status, he had been deliberately delaying the process of fighting against the devils. He had not been actively participating in the military's various operations. According to Black, the strongest devil this time was only at level 5. Although Jack was only at level 3 now, he was confident that he could kill the devil. Black said, "This time, don't kill too many devils, especially that level 5 devil. Once you humans win, you won't have as many chances to eat humans. You must take advantage of this chaotic time to eat more humans and accumulate enough power to reach level 4. Only then can you rule the world without any worries. Don't worry, I know what to do. But the increase in power from eating humans is too little. Eating devils is useless." Jack scratched his head in annoyance, then used numbers to make up for it. Black said fiercely, "In the territory that you rule, there are more than 2 million people, right? If you eat all of them, you might be able to reach level 4. Then you will have the power to rule the world." "I don't think that's a good idea." Jack was still hesitant about Black's suggestion. A few minutes later, Jack, who walked into the city, saw a large number of human and monster corpses. There were also pieces of a few devils among them. There are so many monsters. Who killed them? As he kept moving forward, more and more monster corpses appeared in front of him. All of them were pierced through with a single blow. It was not until half an hour later that he was sure that all the monsters and devils in New York had been wiped out. Most of the survivors were unharmed. "Damn it, who did this?" Jack said with a dark expression. "Could it be William or Lindong, or those guys from the Red Alliance? No, they shouldn't be so powerful. Forget it, they've been wiped out." Then, a black shadow soared into the sky. Jack used supersonic speed to cut through the atmosphere and cleared away the dark clouds above New York. 2 hours later, the Hexagon building received a report from Jack. All the monsters in New York had been wiped out by Jack, the American superhuman. All the soldiers cheered on the spot. America, Chicago. Somewhere in an underground base, a black-haired, black-eyed man was staring intently at a screen. His cold expression, wise eyes, and chiseled cheeks all showed that he was no ordinary man. As his hands kept on tapping, all kinds of information about America and the devils appeared on the screen. "Afu, what happened just now?" An electronic voice rang out from the computer. "We just discovered a high-energy reaction in Manhattan. Then, there was an earthquake of magnitude 3. 4. Then, information about the American superhuman appeared on the screen. The entire New York had been taken over by the American superhuman, and all the monsters had been wiped out." William narrowed his eyes. It was as if the information before him was out of his expectations. William's full name was William Shao. He had lived across the Pacific Ocean and was just an ordinary white-collar worker in the Red Nation. Suddenly, one day, An artificial intelligence from an alien planet entered William Zhao's computer. William Zhao then came to America and made use of the countless advanced technologies that the alien artificial intelligence had. He set up the world, played with supermodels, started a company, bought yachts, drove sports cars, and became the king behind the scenes of the entire Earth. This was how things should have developed. However, William had only developed for slightly over 2 years before the devils appeared. In order to protect his power and get a share of the spoils in this chaotic world, he had no choice but to step out from behind the scenes and use advanced technologies to arm himself to fight against the devils. From a famous playboy and technological genius in the United States, he became the king of Chicago and the hero of the Americans. In the end, like the American superhuman Jack, he took up a position in the hexagon. Ah Fu, who had spoken just now, was naturally the alien artificial intelligence in the computer. At this moment, the computer rang with an ear-piercing alarm. Ah Fu shouted in an urgent voice, "Minnesota, Michigan, and Wisconsin have all experienced earthquakes with magnitudes of more than 7. Damn it, what's going on?" Before he had even finished speaking, the black armor around him flew over and automatically loaded onto William's body. At the next moment, he jumped onto a small fighter jet in the base and soared into the sky, flying toward the 3 northernmost states in the United States. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come and vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Mobile users, please read it at M. Chapter 427. Just as William's plane broke through the clouds, a communication request appeared on the screen of the plane's cockpit. Ah Fu's voice rang out at the same time. "Young master, it's a communication request from Yang Dali. Disconnect, ignore this idiot." Who knew that just as William finished speaking, the entire screen flashed. A man with a shaved head, a golden necklace, and all sorts of expensive rings on his fingers appeared before William, occupying the entire screen. Ha 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 ha. After a series of arrogant, egotistical, idiotic, and awkward laughs, Yang Dali said excitedly, "William, your computer is too easy to hack. You're no match for me when it comes to black technology. Ha ha ha." After saying that, Yang Dali snapped his fingers. One of the 2 maids at the side handed him a cigar, while the other lit up a bunch of banknotes and lit Yang Dali's cigar. Seemingly used to William's silence, Yang Dali continued to clamor, "William, have you seen a new issue of the VC Wealth Ranking? Ha 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 ha. I'm still number 1 this time, and you're number 2. I've specially come to inform you today to let you know that when it comes to money, you'll always be below me." William didn't seem to be angry. He only frowned and said, "The VC Wealth Rankings office should have been destroyed in the battle in Manhattan. To think that they're still in the mood to create this ranking this year." Ha ha. Yang Dali smiled proudly. "That's because I've acquired their entire company and parent company. Now, they're all working in the Chi Nation. But don't think that I'll cheat just because I'm the boss. I have more money than the 9 of you combined." William rolled his eyes, as if he couldn't be bothered with him. Ha 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 ha. After another series of wild laughter, Yang Dali suddenly exclaimed, "Oh no, I've earned tens of millions while talking to you. I have to hurry and spend it." After saying that, he was about to end the call with William. William couldn't help but rub his forehead and said helplessly, "Young Dali, did you specially contact me just to tell me that you have more money than me?" "Of course, what else could it be? Don't tell me you're not convinced." Young Dali revealed an excited smile. "If you're not convinced, then let's compete. Let's see who can burn money for the longest." At this moment, someone beside Young Dali seemed to have scolded him. He patted his head and said, "Oh, I forgot. I contacted you because I have something to ask you. The Scarlet Alliance has something to ask me, right?" William looked at Young Dali as if he was looking at air. "If you're asking me about Manhattan and the sudden large-scale earthquake in the north of the United States, I can only tell you regretfully that I don't know the cause." Young Dali said, "Then do you know that after the large-scale earthquake in your place, more than 30 places around the world had earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, tornadoes, and other disasters? Although their time was very close, there was still a sequence. The route of these disasters started from the north of the United States, passed through the entire northern America, followed by the North Pole, Europe, Africa, West Asia, Southeast Asia, and finally disappeared in Antarctica. After a pause, young Dolly seemed to be listening to the person beside him. Then, he nodded and repeated, "We suspect that a new powerful monster has appeared. If these natural disasters were caused by him, then his strength has far exceeded our imagination. In the face of such a monster, we might need to join forces." William frowned. "I'll verify the situation you've mentioned and report it to the League of Legends. If there's a need, we'll contact you again." The next moment, he shouted, "Ah fu!" cut off the connection. The entire screen flashed again, and young Dolly's figure completely disappeared. The fighter plane that William was piloting spewed out a long red tail flame and flew toward the location of the earthquake. Qi Country, Beiping City. As the center of the entire Qi Country, with a population of more than 1 billion people, Beiping City also suffered a huge blow when faced with the attack of the devil. However, with the intervention of several powerful people, they were finally able to defend the city. Despite this, a large number of buildings in Beiping City have been turned into ruins. Occasionally, airplanes and even war vehicles would whiz past. In a meeting room, the 4 founders of the Crimson Alliance were having a discussion about the abnormal situation that had just occurred on the planet. The Crimson Alliance was an organization set up by these 4 powerful people in order to fight against the devil and protect the people. After just a few short months of development, the Crimson Alliance's forces had spread to all corners of the world, completely overriding the remaining government of the Qi Country. However, faced with the devil tide that had engulfed the entire world, as well as the endless sea of humans and monsters, the Qi Country was the country that the devils had attacked the most due to its massive population. It was also the country with the highest number of humans and monsters in the world. Therefore, the Crimson Alliance could only ensure that the 4 cities, Beiping, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Zhongqing, were their strongholds and spread out in all directions to guard these 4 places tightly. As for the other cities, they could only resign themselves to fate. After William cut off his communication, young Dolly slapped the table in the meeting room and said unhappily, "This lad actually dared to cut off my communication. All right, we brought the information. After William confirms that the situation is true, he'll contact us." Next to young Dolly, a handsome man with long hair and wearing a Taoist robe said, "If the calamity this time around is really caused by those monsters, then our Crimson Alliance must unite with those fellows in the United States." The person who spoke was called Yi Feng. His story was another legend. In Yi Feng's previous life, he was a carefree, immortal lord who had cultivated for 10,000 years in the 9 heavens celestial world. However, when he broke through from the immortal lord to become an immortal king and was about to undergo the 9 heavens lightning tribulation, he was ambushed by his enemies and died. However, before he died, with the help of his life treasure, the chaos bead, he was reborn and became the idiotic 3rd young master of the Yi family on Earth. From then on, he could not lack models, mature ladies, and Lolis. Filming movies, starting a company, and creating online games were all very easy for him. Let's see how immortal King Yi Feng dominated the city with his invincible immortal techniques. Things should have developed like that. However, just as Yi Feng cultivated to the Golden Core realm with the help of his fiancée's virgin primordial Yin, the demon crisis erupted. Seeing that the government's army was being defeated by the demon's attacks, Yi Feng made a prompt decision and joined forces with 3 other powerful people to form the Crimson Alliance. He also took in many members and became the current ruler of the Crimson Country. Hearing Yi Feng's words, young Dolly mumbled a few words and stopped complaining. Although he was the richest person in the entire Crimson Alliance and provided all the funds for the Crimson Alliance's development, he did not dare to disobey Yi Feng when he thought of his powerful strength and cruel means. After Yi Feng finished speaking, a young man sitting opposite him also spoke up. "The Americans can't be trusted. That fake foreigner William isn't anything good either. They should be wiped out sooner or later." Yi Feng shook his head. "The most important thing now is to clear out those monsters. It's also necessary to join forces with the Americans, especially their League of Legends. They can go up against us head-on. It just so happens that William is from the Crimson Country to begin with. He can be our communication bridge. If it were anyone else, Yifeng would not need to explain. However, the young man sitting opposite him was an existence that even immortal King Yifeng had to treat with caution. This young man was one of the four powerhouses of the Crimson Alliance, Saint Martial Artist Qin Ning. Speaking of Qin Ning's experiences, it was another legendary story that was both inspiring and tragic. In order to make Lan Yike, who had broken off their engagement, regret it, Qin Ning, who had dropped out of high school, decided to become a professional gamer. He started playing the online game, Dragon Ascension, which affected the world economy. Just as the Saint Martial Artist character he was controlling flashed with a golden light and became the first player to obtain a divine weapon in Dragon Ascension, the computer in the internet cafe crashed, and his character disappeared. Qin Ning, who was disheartened, walked up to the rooftop. However, he discovered that the Saint Martial Artist in the online game had appeared in reality and was completely under his control. All the living creatures in the world had become his training targets. What? You said that your family is rich? Watch how I explode you into gold coins. What? You said that your father is omnipotent? Watch how I explode you into gold coins. What? You said that you're a heavenly beauty and as beautiful as a flower. Very well. From today onwards, other than me, all the men who get close to you will become gold coins. In the meeting room, Saint Martial Artist Qin Ning nodded after hearing Yifeng's words. Got it. After we wipe out those monsters, we'll deal with the British Alliance. We'll kill their entire families, steal their women, and confiscate their assets. At that moment, the alarm in the meeting room rang again. At that moment, the alarm in the meeting room rang again. Chapter 428. Qi Country, South Sea Coast. The originally beautiful beach was now like a young lady who had been ravaged. Large areas of the beach, buildings, and roads were submerged. All of these indicated that this place had just been hit by a great disaster. After the Crimson Alliance received the alarm, they immediately sent two of their members to rush over. One of them was a burly man wearing a Kevlar assault suit and carrying a rifle on his back. He walked down from a jeep and stepped on the sand under his feet with his military boots. Looking at the world in front of him that had turned into a vast ocean, he said with some lingering fear, "Who did this? Were the tsunamis and typhoons really caused by those monsters?" Next to him was a huge tiger that was over 3 meters long. The tiger's tail lashed out in the air, producing crisp crackling sounds from time to time. The tiger opened its mouth and spoke the human language. Whether or not it's true has nothing to do with us anymore. In any case, we can only deal with some small monsters at most. A monster that can cause such a change in the weather isn't something we can deal with. I know. That muscular soldier took out his binoculars and scanned the surface of the sea. He discovered that many human monsters' corpses were floating on the sea. But since the higher-ups gave the order, we came over to take a look. In any case, we'll run as soon as we see a level 3 monster. After a few months of resistance, the humans on this planet had a clear classification of the demon's strength. Ordinary human monsters were level 1 monsters, while elite-level human monsters were level 2 monsters. Those with strange appearances that were different from humans were all collectively referred to as level 3 monsters. Each level 3 monster was extremely powerful and could crush an army head-on. But it seems that these monsters are also fighting amongst themselves. The tsunamis and typhoons this time around have killed many human monsters. Just as the muscular man finished saying this, he suddenly heard the tiger next to him growling. He put down his binoculars and saw that a young man in white clothes had appeared on the surface of the sea. He was 2 meters away from the surface of the sea, floating quietly in midair. Blue electric sparks would occasionally sputter out from his body and scatter in the air. The tiger next to him arched its back, and its fur stood up. It said nervously, "This guy is so dangerous. His killing intent is so strong. Let's say hello first." The burly man at the side also had a serious look in his eyes. He first untied the spear on his back and unlocked the safety. Then he shouted at Li Onping, who was on the surface of the water, "Friend, are you also for the Red Alliance?" "I'm Soldier King Chen Luo." After saying that, he pointed at the tiger at the side. "He's the reborn tiger, Lei Yun." Li Onping only glanced at them, and their memories were completely displayed before his eyes. Chen Luo was the strongest war machine in the legends. He was the king of the soldiers in the Dark World. However, due to an accident, he had no choice but to retire. He, who lived in seclusion in Huadu, wanted to live a peaceful life far away from the smoke and blood. But because of his comrade's request, he had no choice but to protect the unruly daughter of a wealthy family. From then on, a hot policewoman, a beautiful female celebrity, a cool teacher, and a blonde spy came one after another. Chen Luo had no choice but to embark on an erotic and exciting adventure in Flower City. What the hell? Li Onping opened his eyes wide and looked at Chen Luo strangely. The Soldier King and the Reborn Tiger merely glanced at Feng Xingjian, and they felt as if their blood had stopped pumping. Each time they breathed, it was as if countless blades were tearing at their lungs. Just as they felt that they were going to break down, although these two guys are a little strange, they aren't bad people. Li Onping withdrew his gaze, and his voice rang out softly next to their ears. "Get your people to stay away from us." At the next moment, the entire sea level rose up, and a loud sound, as if the world had collapsed, rang out in the ears of the man and the tiger. Then, a shock wave blew the two of them several kilometers away. Before the Soldier King and the Reborn Tiger could react, their vision turned black, and they fainted completely. By the time the Red Alliance's rescue team arrived, they discovered that the man and the tiger had fallen into a state of unconsciousness with a large area of fractures all over their bodies and their hearts and lungs failing. The place they had been standing at earlier had completely turned into a mirror-like sea level. In the northern part of the United States, in Minnesota, a small fighter jet cut across the vast forest and then stopped in midair. Flames shot out from the bottom of the plane, and it gradually reduced its speed, drifting forward bit by bit. On the plane, William looked at the devastated land with a grim expression. With the forest behind him as the dividing line, the land before him seemed to have been hit by an asteroid. The trees were either buried by soil and rocks, or they were blown away or torn apart. There were also countless huge cracks in the ground that one could not see the end of. They seemed to lead to the underground world, standing under William's feet. Although William had already seen countless similar scenes in the three regions in the north today, he still could not help but feel astonished. What on earth had caused such tremendous destruction? A few minutes later, William stopped the fighter jet in midair. Wearing metal armor, he leaped out of the pilot cabin of the plane and landed on ground. Under his feet, there was a huge fist imprint that was about the size of a cruise ship that was 3 to 4 meters deep. Seeing that his entire body had landed in this fist imprint that was like a crater, William wore an expression of disbelief. What on earth is going on? Just then, a deep voice rang out from behind William. It seems that some terrifying monsters have appeared. Who is it? William turned around and saw a man wearing a cloak, a mask, and black armor slowly walking out from the shadows. The man said in an extremely deep voice, "Should I call you Metal Man? Or William Shao?" "Night Eagle Man?" William asked. "When did you come here?" At the same time, he recalled the other party's information. Night Eagle Man, or rather, Victor, was originally a hidden wealthy man in Kansas. However, 1 year ago, he suddenly fell seriously ill and was in a coma for 3 days and 3 nights. After waking up, Victor seemed to have changed into a different person. Not only did he continuously make several miraculous investments in the following year, but his assets had also increased by several tens of times. Moreover, according to William's information, Victor had secretly unified the entire underground world in Kansas. He had astonishing close combat abilities and was proficient in martial arts and fighting techniques for various countries. His strength and speed had reached an almost inhuman level. He was simply a human-shaped Tyrannosaurus Rex, and he even had the record of killing a level 3 monster by himself. standing in front of such a destructive machine. Even the newly developed armor on his body could not make William feel safe. In addition to his amazing combat skills and financial talent, what made William feel the most strange was that Victor had hoarded a large amount of supplies before the monster appeared, as if he had already known that this disaster was going to happen. Like Superman and William, Victor had also become a member of the Hexagon and wore the equipment that he had funded and developed. He was known as Night Eagle Man and was one of the members of the American League of Legends. Night Eagle Man did not seem to expect that William would think of so many things in just one sentence. However, in the face of William's question, he said in his usual cold tone, "I arrived a few minutes earlier than you." He pointed to the huge fist mark that had caused the terrain to change and said, "What do you think?" William felt that Victor was a little nervous. He thought about it and said, "In theory, there are no creatures on Earth that can cause such damage. Even among those monsters, there is no existence that can cause such a large-scale earthquake. However, I think that the person who did this might be helping us." "Why do you think so?" "On the way here, I got off food to check the information on the internet. After the earthquake here, there were various natural disasters on a large scale all over the world, and the ones who died the most in these natural disasters were those monsters. Therefore, I suspect that a human like us used a weapon that surpassed modern technology to attack those monsters." Just then, Night Eagle pressed his ear, as if he was conducting some kind of long-distance communication. A moment later, he said to William, who was in front of him, "It seems that your speculation is wrong." "What?" Just then, there was a tremor from the ground. When William raised his head, Night Eagle had already disappeared before his eyes. At the same time, Ah Fu's electronic voice came from the communication device in the armor. "Young Master, Luo City has been attacked by an unknown humanoid creature. 2 hours ago, in Luo City, America, as the headquarters of the American Superman, Jack, the material living conditions here were much worse than before the end of the world. However, compared to the disaster areas in other parts of the world, it was already a paradise. Every day, there would be long queues of refugees waiting to enter the city at the few checkpoints at the entrance of Luo City. As the tallest building in Luo City, and even in the entire California, the 310-meter-tall Federal Bank building had not been destroyed in the war with the demons due to Jack's protection. Right now, this skyscraper that could overlook the scenery of Luo City had naturally become Jack's personal palace. Jack, who had returned to Luo City via an exclusive plane last night, was now lying on a huge soft bed on the highest floor of the Federal Bank building. The floor-to-ceiling glass was just a few meters in front of him, allowing him to clearly overlook the scenery of Luo City. He pulled his body out from the surrounding pink breasts and buttocks. One of the blonde young ladies hugged him with an intoxicated expression. Seeing the young lady's dazed expression, it seemed that she had yet to wake up from the craziness from last night. Jack took a large handful of granular pills from the side of the bed and stuffed them into her mouth. Then he pushed her back onto the bed. Seeing how her limbs were twisted and she was smiling foolishly, he smiled maliciously. Then he took out a large handful of pills and stuffed them into his mouth as well. Compared to the dangers of ordinary humans taking drugs, Jack now had superhuman immunity. There were no side effects from taking drugs at all. However, the pleasure he got was not as strong as that of ordinary people. Just as he was looking at the few young ladies lying on the bed and thinking about whether he should do some morning exercises, a terrifying explosion rang out in the sky. Silver light flashed, and it was as if a thunderbolt had streaked across the sky above Luo City. Jack immediately rushed over, his eyes staring intently at the sky that was emitting ear-piercing sounds. He mumbled, "What's that? A fighter jet?" At the next moment, he had already jumped down from the building and rushed toward the place where the explosion had come from. However, the moment he jumped down, a strong gust of wind gushed toward him, and a terrifying shock wave immediately swept him out, crashing into the Federal Bank building. All the glass in the building shattered at this moment, and the reinforced concrete shook as if the building was going to collapse at the next moment. Jack stood up with his face covered in blood. As his wounds continued to heal, he wanted to run out of the building, Based on his experience, the building would collapse soon after shaking to this extent. As for the people in the building, it was even more impossible for him to waste time saving them. However, he had only taken a few steps when the entire building seemed to flash. Some unknown means had stopped the shaking and even reinforced the building to prevent it from collapsing. Jack then saw a man in white clothes floating quietly in midair outside the building. He seemed to have noticed Jack's gaze, and he glanced at him slightly. That gaze of Jack's, as if he was looking at an ant, made Jack feel extremely displeased. However, at the next moment, the other party frowned, and a cold gleam was emitted from his eyes. It made Jack's body feel as if it had been pricked by needles, and he could not move at all. Jack could only watch as the other party's fingers moved inch by inch, and then the other party tapped out toward him. Jack's body instantly entered an explosive state. Black's roar rang out in his heart, but he could not hear anything. The other party's speed was too fast, and there was nothing he could do. He could only see Fong Dong's shadow in front of him, and that was already his limit. Then he felt a destructive power emerging from his body. Throughout the entire process, whether it was the other party's gaze or movements, they were as casual as crushing an ant. Jack's self-esteem was poked until it was bleeding. Before he lost consciousness, he could only feel that a black shadow seemed to have knocked the man in white clothes away, causing the man's finger to deviate slightly. In the next second, Jack completely lost consciousness. Jack! Jack, wake up! In a daze, Jack opened his eyes. At this moment, most of his body had disappeared, and only half of his brain was left. He could only feel a heart-wrenching pain spreading through his brain. The regeneration energy in his body had also been depleted. The strong man named Mark was putting the wound on his wrist to Jack's mouth, letting Jack suck his blood. He was Jack's most loyal subordinate, and also his only friend in high school. Seeing Jack open his eyes, Mark said excitedly, "Jack, you're awake?" However, his excited expression did not last for a second before it completely froze. Jack dug out his heart and stuffed it into his mouth. He raised his head and looked around. The original skyscraper and the streets around the skyscraper had become a huge crater. Around him were hundreds of his subordinates with injuries all over their bodies. They were looking at him in fear while he was eating. Black's voice rang in his ears. "We've been dead for more than 10 minutes. I have to say, I despise you for telling your ability to the people close to you. But now, it seems that humans are more stupid than I thought. By doing this, you've actually prepared some backup rations for us." Jack said angrily, "What the hell is going on? Who is that man? Shouldn't I be the strongest person on this planet? That's because you haven't grown enough." Black's voice was full of temptation. "As long as you reach the 4th energy level, you'll be as strong as the man in white clothes, or even stronger than him. Do you want revenge? That would be to eat all of these people. Anyway, you can push all the blame to the guy who attacked us just now." Recalling the gaze of the man in white clothes, the way he looked at him as if he was an ant, an insect, Jack let out a furious roar and rushed into the crowd, stirring up a storm of blood. Chapter 429. In outer space, several 100,000 kilometers away from the horizon, Lian Ping, who was dressed in white, stood quietly in a corner, like an unchanging statue. No matter what, nothing could leave a trace on his body. Over 10 kilometers away from him, opposite him, was an evil god tribe's warrior that was covered in a gray stratum corneum. It had 2 large, sharp horns on its head and a thick and strong tail on its back that kept on lashing out. It was the level 8 evil god tribe's warrior that had been sent by the evil god tribe to investigate the matter of Higram losing contact with him. Right now, the space where Lianping and this warrior were in was like 2 halves of the same world. On Lianping's side, everything was very calm. It was as if the space had also been frozen, not moving at all, maintaining the state of the universe's vacuum. On the other hand, on the evil god tribe's warrior's side, the originally thin particles seemed to have gathered together and turned into a solid state. It was like a piece of transparent crystal that encompassed the warrior and the space around it. At the boundary between the 2 spaces, The matter seemed to be constantly changing between its original state and its solid state. Many scenes of the battle with the other party appeared in Li Onping's mind. From the first time he had tracked down the other party's aura to the moment they exchanged blows in the Northern American continent, Fang Xingjian had continued to pursue the other party. Within a short period of time, the battle had spread across the entire world. However, he was still unable to kill the other party completely. Based on Hygrim's memories, all members of the evil god tribe would be able to reach the 6th energy level as long as they lived long enough. To them, level 0 to level 6 was just one level, representing commoners. The 7th energy level represented awakening, which was equivalent to level 0 for humans. To them, the 8th energy level represented true ability users. This was a terrifying race. Hygrim's enraged intent, body structure, and attributes were merely their basic attributes. It was only when they reached the 8th energy level that they would awaken different abilities, just like how humans had truly become level 1 ability users with intent. Previously, Li Onping had asked the Chaos Tide what the Red River King's ability was. It was because of this reason that he wanted to know what ability the Red River King had awakened. However, the Chaos Tide had only brushed past this lightly and did not tell Li Onping anything. Based on the current performance, this guy can transform himself and everything around him into gaseous, solid, and liquid states. However, this only restricts many of my attack methods at most. The most troublesome thing is still the ability to not die that is similar to reincarnation. This was the reason why Li Onping had chased after him for more than half of the planet. Just then, the warrior from the evil god tribe spoke up. He licked his lips and revealed a hideous smile. Interesting. To think that you can kill me 34 times. He doesn't seem to be a native of this planet. Otherwise, how could Hastings have survived until now? Hearing the other party's words, Li Onping also planned to test the waters. However, he naturally could not tell the other party his true origins. Therefore, he said, "This place is indeed not my home world. So, I was thinking, if I were to wipe out all the life on this planet, would you still be able to revive?" "Oh, just now, when we fought our way here, you took the initiative to reduce the damage and the aftermath of our attacks." That warrior smiled. "I don't believe that someone like you would be able to kill all the people on an entire planet. However, even if I were to really destroy this planet, I might become in an even more difficult to deal with state." Clearly, both of them were testing each other. Li Onping was not willing to wipe out all the humans on an entire planet in one go and wanted to find out the reason why the other party was not dead. On the other hand, the evil god tribe's warrior was trying to find the flaws in the other party's mental state and abilities despite being suppressed in terms of strength. "Oh, right. I've warmed up a little. I still don't know your name. I'm called Rakonos. What's your name?" "Unfamiliar warrior." "Li Onping." Li Onping threw him a glance. Thinking of the other party's earlier actions, he suddenly said calmly, "Earlier, I seem to have smelled black scent down there." The other party's expression did not change at all, but the slight fluctuations in his gaze could not escape Li Onping's observation. As expected, in order to stop me earlier, he did not hesitate to let me smash his body into smithereens before reincarnating once again. This means that the demons who arrived here first did discover Black's tracks. However, they didn't have the confidence to defeat Black and thus called Rakonos over. Since you've also discovered it, then you should also know about the existence of my tribe, right? For a powerhouse like you, obtaining Black's doppelganger won't bring you any qualitative improvement. If you don't like us destroying this planet, I can immediately bring my people and leave. The only thing I need is for you to hand over this clone of Black to me." Li Onping did not reply. He merely clenched his fists slightly. "I'll consider it. During this period of time, you can die once first." In the next moment, Li Onping punched out. Countless rays of light completely drowned Rakonos. Under hundreds of thousands of light-speed punches every second, Rakonos' entire body slowly shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, he directly turned into a pile of powder and disappeared. "Rakonos, so that's how it is. After coming to outer space, his strength has become stronger than before. This Li Anping is indeed protective of the humans on this planet. Next time, should I use this characteristic to attack with all my might? But it seems that I haven't tested the limits of his power. Li Anping, he's still not dead. This place is already more than 500,000 kilometers away from Earth. The surrounding space is almost in a state of vacuum, and I don't see any soul escaping. It seems that his ability to reincarnate does not rely on the surrounding medium. It's hard to say about the distance requirements. The undying nature of an 8th level energy. The most troublesome thing is that this ability can be activated on its own. Ordinary imprisonment methods are useless, and he intentionally died under this attack, wanting to drag the battlefield back to the planet so that I won't be able to unleash my full power. The two opponents each had different thoughts. One of them dissipated with the wind, while the other turned and looked in the direction of the planet. This Rakonos is very used to making use of his undying nature to test his opponent's time and time again. By the looks of it, he still has some moves with extremely powerful killing prowess that he hasn't used yet. Forget it. I'll control black first. It should be about level 4 now. After thinking for a while, Li Anping had already turned into a stream of light and headed toward Earth. In the square of Luoyang City, Jack casually tore a middle-aged man into two. Sensing that the other party's soul had been absorbed by him, Jack then bit off the flesh on the other party's shoulder. Under his feet, the surrounding streets and buildings were filled with several tens of thousands of human corpses. His body had long since been tainted by blood. He's here. This feeling. Jack looked at his hands excitedly, feeling the powers in his body continue to surge wildly toward his limbs and bones. If I'd known earlier, I'd have killed all these pigs earlier. How could I have let that guy be so arrogant? Thinking of the white-clothed man who had easily killed him earlier, Jack broke into a hideous smile. When I meet you again, I'll eat up your flesh piece by piece. Just as Jack attained a breakthrough to level 4, a black silhouette darted out from his back. Black's voice entered Jack's ears through the vibrations in the air. Don't worry, Li Anping. If I meet him in the other worlds in the future, I'll help you take revenge. Black. Jack turned and saw the black human silhouette appearing before him. Puzzled, Jack asked, "What's the matter with you? Why are you able to appear in the real world?" Hey ignored him and reached for Jack's head with one hand. This guy before him had a weak will. Compared to mental attacks, physical attacks would be easier to make him submit. However, at the same time when Black's psychic clone reached out with his claws, a stream of white light flashed. Li Anping appeared between the two of them, grabbing onto the psychic clone's arm with one hand. Black looked at Li Anping, who had suddenly appeared in surprise. Just as he was wondering why he had suddenly appeared, there was a loud bang. On the other side, Jack had activated his explosive state. His fist, which was mixed with psychic energy, landed a punch on Li Anping's chest. In his eyes, Li Anping was an enemy. Therefore, when he saw him, he subconsciously attacked. Black looked at Jack as if he was looking at an idiot. Meanwhile, Li Anping withdrew his gaze from Black and turned to look at Jack, who was slowly retracting his fist. At the same time, when Li Anping turned his head, Black's psychic clone let out a miserable cry. Li Anping had already squeezed it into a bead and tossed it into his mouth, as if he was chewing gum. Jack covered his right arm with his left hand, staring blankly at Li Anping, who was unscathed and had just swallowed Black in one gulp. His entire arm had started to swell little by little. The only effect caused by his full-powered punch was a comminuted fracture of his arm. At this moment, he saw Li Anping's indifferent gaze when he turned his head. It was as if he had seen his father, who had just returned home after a parent-teacher conference. Cold sweat began to seep out from his back. Chapter 430. Looking at Jack, who seemed to be at a loss, Li Anping said calmly, "Your strength isn't bad." Compared to Jack's right hand, which had yet to completely heal itself, this sentence was a great irony. Jack looked at Li Anping with a flushed face, feeling as if his heart had been stabbed fiercely. Fury filled his heart. Ever since he had obtained Black's abilities, his path had been smooth sailing. When had he ever encountered such a situation? No one can look down on me. No one can think of trampling on my dignity. Jack bellowed furiously, forcibly suppressing the terror in his heart earlier. The black psychic energy all over his body started to burn fiercely. His left hand, which was in perfect condition, once again swelled up and punched out toward Lianping, who was right in front of him. With this punch, a terrifying power tore through the air, releasing a terrifying sharp whistle. The power of Jack's punch was enough to send over 10 tanks flying. His eyes were emitting a bloodthirsty gaze, as if he had already seen Li Onping being smashed into pieces by his punch. However, faced with Jack's furious punch that had come out with all his might, Li Onping merely threw a glance at him calmly. However, such a simple glance was enough to make Jack suffer greatly. With a loud boom, Jack's chest seemed to have been struck by a battering ram. He was sent flying backward at a speed faster than his full speed, drawing out a faint stream of white air in the air. Amidst a series of crashing sounds, Jack crashed through a total of 12 buildings. In the end, he completely sank into a stretch of cement and steel bars. With just a glance, there seemed to be no part of Jack's body that was still intact. He let out a cry, wanting to lift his head up and climb out from the pile of cement ruins. However, he realized that Li Onping had appeared before him once again without him noticing. Li Onping had stepped lightly on Jack's head, causing him to be unable to lift his head up no matter how hard he tried. Li Onping was searching for Black's information to decide how to deal with Jack. Jack exerted his strength several times in a row, but he felt that the foot on his head was like a mountain. No, it was like the sky was collapsing. No matter how much strength he exerted, not to mention raising his head, every muscle in his body was trembling violently, but he could not move at all. He was both shocked and angry. Who are you? Let me out if you have the guts. 30 years in the East, 30 years in the West. Don't bully a poor youth. If you have the ability, let me go this time. We'll compete again next time. Do you dare? Are you afraid of my potential? Are you afraid that I will surpass you in the future? Is that why you want to kill me now? Shut up. In the face of his provocation, Li Onping only added a little more strength and stomped his head into the ground. Jack opened his mouth and was stuffed with a large mouthful of soil. He could only make muffled sounds as he struggled. On the other side, Li Onping's consciousness had sunk into the black sphere in his stomach. That was Black's clone. The two of them began to communicate with each other through their consciousness. Black, you can still recognize me. It seems that all of your consciousness are connected, but I didn't expect that you would choose such a person to possess. Li Onping, you've grown faster than I thought. However, it's not as if there hasn't been a genius like you in the multiverse who had escaped my control. Black's voice was filled with malice. Guess what happened to them in the end? I'm not interested in knowing what happened to them. Li Onping showed an interesting expression. But I'm interested in your existence. In the next moment, Li Onping began to scan Black's structure, data, and information as if he was scanning the memories of an ordinary person. However, he found nothing. Just like how other people's spiritual attacks were ineffective against him. When Li Onping began to skim Black, he felt that Black was like a wormhole. All of his probing methods seemed to be connected to another universe. Countless information flowed in it, but he could not find any information about Black. Black laughed. It's useless, Li Onping. As long as I don't want to, you'll never be able to scan my memories. If you want to know something, come and talk to me. Talk, Li Onping thought to himself. These demonic gods who had dominated the multiverse for tens of thousands of years were indeed not easy to deal with. In their hearts, most of the love and hatred could be replaced by pure interests and preferences. However, in the next moment, Li Onping had already sunk a part of his consciousness into Black's body. As if passing through a layer of membrane, a strange and absurd world appeared before Li Onping. It was as if all kinds of colors were mixed together, and the world became a palette of different colors. There were no planets, no sun, and no living creatures. Only the various colors that were mixed together blurred Li Onping's vision. There were also the wailing spirits and heart-wrenching screams. No, this world did not even have the concept of sound. The so-called screams were a purely spiritual sense. A spiritual universe? Just as Li Onping was thinking about that, the world before him had become pitch black, or pure nothingness. Even the concepts of space and time were quickly stripped away. Lianping, this is not a place you should be. Then, Lianping felt that the consciousness that he had extended into black was instantly wiped out and completely disappeared. So that's how it is. You've created a spiritual universe in your mind. Lianping said, it seems that if you're in that world, no one can kill you. So, if you want to know something, come and talk to me. Otherwise, at most, you'll just eat one of my clones. Black laughed coldly. Lianping, there are many areas where we can work together. For example, some of the 12 demonic gods are our enemies. Lianping ignored him. He knew that Black's matters and secrets could not be solved in a short period of time. So, he focused his attention on Jack, who was under his feet. Now, without Black's support, Jack's sea of consciousness was still huge, and ordinary spiritual attacks were ineffective. However, it was not as difficult to observe as Black's spiritual universe. With Lianping's current strength and computing ability, it only took him 10 seconds to sweep through all the memories in Jack's mind, as well as the memories of those who had been devoured. When Lianping spoke to Jack again, his voice was filled with coldness. His eyes were filled with disgust as he looked at Jack. You're worse than I thought. Even Lianping could not help but release his murderous intent when he saw the brutal scenes in Jack's memories. This little man who had always been bullied and humiliated by others, after obtaining the power to bully others and the guidance of Black, had completely unleashed the darkest part of human nature. Lianping raised his foot slightly and stomped down hard on Jack's back. With a squelch, as if something was forcefully squeezed out, Lianping's foot had crushed Jack's lung. Jack's entire body convulsed. Blood surged up from his face, turning it red. He wanted to roar and resist. However, whether it was the power that bound his body or the crushed lung, he did not have the slightest chance to resist or roar. At this moment, Lianping's voice was like the cold wind of Siberia, entering Jack's ears. You like to eat little girls, right? With a snap, Jack's right arm was torn off and thrown on the ground. You like to eat people alive, right? Bang, 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 bang. The steel-like muscle fibers on his thigh were torn off bit by Lianping. You like to rape and kill, right? With his lower body crushed in a meat paste, Jack's entire body twisted wildly. His eyes bulged and were almost bloodshot. Unlike Lianping, who was used to being injured in the past, his ability to endure pain was not strong. At this moment, Lianping's voice was no different from the whispers of the devil in his ears. He wanted to beg for mercy, but other than whimpering, he could not say anything. I've also killed people, eaten souls, and even swallowed human flesh. Lianping squatted down and put his hand on the back of Jack's head. He gently stroked it, causing the latter to have goosebumps. Logically speaking, I don't have the right to teach you a lesson. Jack felt the palm pressing down on the back of his head gradually increase in strength. The fear in his heart was constantly magnified. His teeth kept chattering, making clattering sounds. But I think that since you've eaten so much human flesh, you should be prepared to be eaten by others. Bang! Puff! Chapter 431. In the huge conference room of the Hexagon building, more than 70% of the members of the League of Legends were present. Other than that, there were also various members such as the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, the Director of the FBI, and many others. There were even some people that no one had ever heard of. Beside the metal hero William, a young man in a long robe smiled and said to him, "William, do you know why you have gathered so many people here today? I heard that Jack subdued Manhattan. Why does Pawson's expression look so bad?" William looked at the young man and said slowly, "Luo City was attacked by an unknown humanoid creature. Jack is dead." At the same time, he recalled the information about the superhero beside him. Lin Dong, an ordinary young man in the 21st century. After falling out of love, he jumped off the cliff of Mount Tai and accidentally obtained a bronze ring. It turned out that the bronze ring came from a different world and contained the lifetime collection of a mage god. Facing the school beauties, socialites, tycoons, and politicians, Lin Dong said, "I just want to live the life of an ordinary person." Lin Dong encountered the invasion of demons when he was traveling in America. In the end, he had no choice but to step forward and join the League of Legends in order to protect his lover. As he often used the bronze ring to cast magic, he was also known as the Green Ring Hero. Lin Dong heard William's words and raised his eyebrows. He said in surprise, "That bastard is dead? How is that possible? With that guy's vitality, even a nuclear bomb might not be able to kill him." William did not answer. He only pointed to the front of the conference room with his mouth. Lin Dong turned his head and saw that Pawson from the Secretary of Defense had stood up and started speaking. "Everyone, you are all members of the League of Legends, America's superheroes. Every one of you is a creator of miracles, an immortal myth, and a human legend." Pawson's face was serious. Although every superhero sitting down knew that he was just an ordinary person, they were all affected by his serious expression and aura. They listened to him attentively. But today, an unprecedentedly terrifying opponent has appeared. Pawson gestured, and the assistant underground began to play the video on the monitor in the conference room. "Everyone, perhaps you already know that Manhattan was conquered by America's superheroes. However, 12 hours ago, Luo City was attacked by an unknown humanoid creature, and the America's superheroes were killed." While Pawson was explaining, the display screen began to play groups of portraits. First, it was the Federal Bank building that had been attacked and turned into ruins. Then it was naturally the corpse of America's Superman, Jack. When his body appeared in front of everyone in the meeting room, almost all the women screamed. Some of them even lowered their heads and vomited. The other superheroes, even the Cold Nighthawk and the Rational Metal Man, could not help but narrow their eyes or raise their eyebrows. Beside Metal Hero William, Lin Dong's face was a little pale as he looked at the image. But when he saw that William's expression remained unchanged as he looked at the corpse, he forced himself not to shake his head, but his eyes couldn't help but glance around. He said, "F***CK, it's already turned into jam. How big of a grudge is this? That guy Jack, don't tell me he killed someone else's mother." Although Metal Man's eyes were a little surprised, his expression was calm. He still maintained his usual calmness and said, "Jack has the ability of ultra-rapid regeneration, but this regeneration ability is obviously not infinite. In theory, if you want to kill him completely, you have to keep hurting him physically and finally let him exhaust the energy used for regeneration." At this point, Metal Man's tone changed, and he said coldly, "And this regeneration ability becomes the source of pain in the face of an enemy 10 times or 100 times stronger than himself. Judging from the difference between the state of the corpse and the color of the regenerated flesh, the perpetrator is not only a master, but also very proficient in the human body structure. He made Jack feel the pain torture to the maximum and the highest efficiency." Just as Lin Dong felt a chill when he heard Metal Man's words, Pawson on the stage had already proven what Metal Man said. As you can see, this is the corpse of America's Superman. Pawson's eyes seemed to be spewing flames. According to the forensic analysis, America's Superman was tortured for 40 minutes before he died. Because of the ultra-rapid regeneration ability, his limbs, chest, and head were repeatedly destroyed. The murderer is a person who is very familiar with the human body structure, familiar with interrogation, and good at torture. The people below the stage listened to Pawson's speech. Although they were a little surprised that America's Superman Jack was tortured to death, they felt that it was too much of a fuss to call all of them over such a matter. Some people even knew that Jack liked to eat people and torture civilians, so they were happy about his death. Lin Dong had a similar opinion. Jack was very powerful, and America's Superman was very famous. Now that he was killed, it was indeed a blow to America's morale. Luo City also needed to deal with the aftermath. When the time came, there would probably be a new round of competition. But so what? It was the apocalypse now. How many people on Earth were dying every day? Famine, demons, internal strife, natural disasters, humans in this era. Death was simply a normal thing for them. Even America's Superman was the same. Seriously, can a conference call be enough? Lin Dong touched his nauseous stomach. I have no appetite for dinner. Metal Man heard Lin Dong's words and shook his head. Since Pawson invited us here, it naturally won't end so easily. I'm afraid there's a follow-up to this matter. Follow-up? Lin Dong said, did they find the guy who killed Jack? Maybe Pawson and the others found traces of the other party. But Metal Man William narrowed his eyes, and a trace of seriousness flashed in his eyes. The more troublesome situation is that the other party found us. Found us? Just as Lin Dong was thinking about what Metal Man meant, Pawson on the stage spoke again. At the same time, the image on the screen changed and began to play a video. Everyone, 6 hours ago, the person who claimed to have killed Jack came to the White House. In the video, above the White House, a dark shadow slowly approached. When the shadow revealed its true appearance, everyone present exclaimed in surprise. It's an aircraft carrier. It's the Nimitz. Damn, he lifted the Nimitz to the White House. As the camera zoomed in, a black-haired, white-clothed Asian youth appeared in front of the camera. It was him who lifted the aircraft carrier Nimitz with his left hand and flew over the White House with the aircraft carrier weighing 100,000 tons. Damn, what is he doing? Lin Dong's eyes bulged as he stared at the image of Li Onping lifting the aircraft carrier with one arm. With a face full of disbelief, he said, "Is this for real? This can't be a computer effect, right?" As if he heard Lin Dong's words, Pawson on the stage said coldly, "Everyone, this isn't a movie or an animation. This man not only hijacked the aircraft carrier, drove all the crew members on the ship to the port of Hawaii, but also personally lifted the aircraft carrier to the sky above the White House." As Pawson spoke, an even more unbelievable scene appeared on the screen. Li Onping stretched out his other hand and used his left and right hand at the same time to squeeze the aircraft carrier. The outer shell of the aircraft carrier became as fragile as paper in his hands and was squeezed out of shape in just a few times. Not only did his hands touch the aircraft carrier, but the entire aircraft carrier also began to deform under his terrifying strength. It was as if a pair of invisible hands were kneading and slowly compressing the aircraft carrier. The superheroes in the conference room, as well as the heads of the government, all stared at the screen in a daze, as if they were watching a fairy tale. As they watched the aircraft carrier being compressed and reduced in size in Li Onping's hands, they could almost hear the ear-piercing sound of metal. In less than a minute, Li Onping had squeezed the entire aircraft carrier into a palm-sized iron ball. Looking at Li Onping swinging the pitch-black iron ball back and forth like an ordinary tennis ball, the conference room was filled with the sound of people swallowing their saliva. Finally, Li Onping slowly flew to the lawn in front of the White House and casually placed the iron ball in his hands on the ground. Under the heavy pressure of the iron ball, the entire ground kept cracking. The iron ball seemed to have smashed a whirlpool and kept sinking into the ground, causing terrifying cracks to appear on the lawn around it. The surroundings of the White House were already filled with countless soldiers, tanks, and even superheroes. But they just watched quietly as Li Onping finished everything. No one dared to make any unnecessary movements. At the end of the video, only a USB flash drive could be seen in Li Onping's hand. He threw the USB flash drive to an official in the White House and turned into a ray of light and disappeared. It was not until the video completely stopped that the entire conference room was filled with gasps. No one spoke and no one moved. Everyone looked at Li Onping's disappearing figure on the screen with an unpleasant expression, and they remained silent. After everyone saw this video, they had a feeling of absurdity and fear. They didn't know what to say at all. In the silence, Metal Hero William's voice rang out. This man, let's call him a man for now. With the power he displayed, a few punches would be enough to destroy us. But he didn't do that. Instead, he carried out a typical deterrent force above the White House. This means that he can communicate, and we have something that this man needs. Then, what's the content of the USB flash drive he left behind? Pawson nodded. You're right. He left a message in that USB flash drive. The general content is to tell us that he is an alien from outer space and the enemy who chased him came to Earth. And those monsters that suddenly appeared are creatures called demons. They are his enemies. The various natural disasters that happened around the world in the past few days were the aftermath of his battle with a demon general. In just a few days, just yesterday, he wiped out more than 90% of the demons on Earth. When everyone heard this, they were all overjoyed. Some people even shouted excitedly. No wonder we haven't seen those monsters in the past few days. Have they all been wiped out? Great, this alien is actually here to help us. Only Metal Man and Nighthawk's expressions did not change at all. They still listened to Pawson speak like ice. But he lost track of the demon general he chased all the way. He said that this demon general has disguised himself as a human and wants us to help find this demon general. If we can't find him within 7 days, then he will take special military action, destroy the entire Earth. In the sky, Li Onping's body emitted all kinds of fluctuations. Blue electric currents jumped out from time to time and dissipated in the air. He kept using various methods to scan the entire planet, but he still could not find any trace of the other party. Black's voice sounded. Li Onping, if 7 days are up, will you really destroy this planet? That will depend on how far Rachnos, and the humans on this planet can go in these 7 days. Chapter 432. Just as the superheroes in the conference room were discussing Li Onping's appearance and the premonition of his destruction of the world, a white light flashed across the room. Suddenly, a white light flashed on the stage, and Li Onping, dressed in white, appeared in front of everyone. It's him! That alien! All the superheroes stood up. Some picked up their weapons, and some activated their skills. All of them looked at Li Onping, who had suddenly appeared, with vigilance. Li Onping looked at the crowd below, and his expression did not change. He only said indifferently, "Hello, everyone. I'm Li Onping, the person you just saw in video." As if sensing the hostility of the superheroes, he continued, "Destroying your planet is not my purpose here. I don't like meaningless killing and destruction, but the demon I'm chasing is hiding on your planet. If I don't destroy him, the entire Earth will be turned into hell by him. Compared to that, I'd rather take action myself and destroy your planet along with him." Everyone below the stage immediately buzzed. Among them, Night Condor Man looked at Li Onping and said coldly, "Mr. Li Onping, right? I want to ask what extent you mean by destroying Earth. Is it destroying Earth's ecological environment or killing all of humanity, or some other method?" He did not panic in the face of Li Onping's threat. Instead, he directly asked the most vague part of Li Onping's threat. How would this so-called destruction of Earth be done? Everyone fell silent when they heard Night Condor Man's question, because the answer to this question was very important. Not only could they know what methods the other party might use, but they could also infer the strength of the alien in front of them based on the methods the other party displayed. Under everyone's gaze, Li Onping slowly raised his head and looked in the direction of the sky. His eyes seemed to be able to see through the ceiling of the hexagon and see the night sky. Following his action, the cement, steel bars, and metal above the conference room all changed their material structure, turning into something similar to glass. Everyone could clearly see the scene in the sky. At the same time, Li Onping's voice rang in everyone's ears. "In my hometown, there is also a moon." The moon hanging in the night sky began to shrink as Li Onping spoke. "How is this possible? The moon is actually getting smaller?" "No, it's not that the moon is getting smaller," Li Onping nodded. "That's right. I just want the moon to leave Earth first." Following these series of movements, everyone could feel the faint tremors of the Earth under their feet. Metal Hero William looked at the gradually disappearing moon in the sky in disbelief. Even he, who usually thought of himself as calm and rational, could not help but shout out, "Are you kidding me? Do you know what would happen if the Earth didn't have a moon?" Solar wind and cosmic rays. The Earth's magnetic field will disappear, and solar wind and cosmic rays will appear on Earth without any obstruction. "I know." Li Onping nodded indifferently. "But with me around, I'll activate the magnetic field to replace the Earth's original magnetic field and ensure that the solar wind and cosmic rays won't hurt the people on Earth. But other than that, I'll let the other changes happen. Among the superheroes, only a small number of them knew what it meant for the Earth to not have a moon. All of them looked at Li Onping with ugly expressions as he continued to tell them this fact. The 23-degree inclination between the Earth's axis and the Earth's orbit will disappear. All places on Earth will receive the same amount of sunlight, and everything will become like spring all year round. From this point of view, it's not bad. However, the tides will disappear completely. The changes in the light received by the two poles of the Earth might cause glaciers to melt and sea levels to rise. In addition, the rotation time of the Earth will change from 24 hours to 7 and 2 hours. As if he did not notice the ugly expressions of the superheroes, Li Onping continued in a calm voice. But this is only the beginning. If you help me find the demon within 7 days, everything will return to normal. After 7 days, if the demon is not found, the moon will hit the Earth like a meteor at a speed of 1 million kilometers per hour. Your planet will experience an unprecedented explosion. The Earth will be smashed into countless pieces. The meteorites and rays it produces will sweep across the entire solar system, and everything within a few 100 million kilometers of the Earth will be melted by the high temperature of more than 1 billion degrees. In addition, the asteroid belt will be blown apart. Even the sun might be smashed through the troposphere due to the impact of a large number of meteorites and enter the aging stage in advance. The entire solar system will become hell, a forbidden zone for life. Everyone was already looking at Li Onping on the stage with cold sweat on their foreheads. Their minds seemed to be filled with the scene of the end of the Earth described by Li Onping. In an instant, 3 figures rushed toward Li Onping on the stage. They were 3 superheroes. They came to Li Onping's side at an astonishing speed and pointed their swords and guns at each other. They were sweating profusely and said nervously, "Stop quickly and let the moon come back." Li Onping's expression remained calm when he saw the 3 nervous heroes and their swords and guns pointing at him, as if nothing had happened. He said in a calm voice, "Your rationality has been swallowed by your emotions. As a human with insufficient intelligence evolution, I understand why you are doing this. However, I will still respond to your childish threats." Before he finished his sentence, the 3 superheroes let out agonizing cries and fell off the stage one after another. Li Onping's voice carried a hint of coldness as it entered everyone's ears. It's the same for you guys. As humans who are unable to control their emotions effectively, I'll allow you guys one chance to attack me, but only one chance. After saying that, he pointed toward the sky and the moon that was slowly appearing. What I did earlier was just to show you how the Earth will be destroyed. I hope that everyone can understand the urgency of the matter and prevent you from doing something stupid that can't be salvaged. Seeing the moon appear once again in the sky, everyone heaved a huge sigh of relief, feeling as if they had just survived a calamity. However, their gazes when they looked at Li Onping had turned into a sincere fear. They all understood that martial prowess was useless when dealing with the alien in front of them. The aircraft carrier's attack isn't a real threat. It's just a means to gather us together. If the moon had been moved from the start, there'd be a high possibility that things would have gone out of control when we're scattered all over the place. Therefore, this guy first gathered us through the aircraft carrier and the USB flash drive. Then, by moving the moon, he really threatened us with martial prowess. These thoughts flashed through Metal Man's mind, but he still maintained a certain level of calmness. He looked at Li Onping and said, "Mr. Li Onping, we know your power and understand that you do have the ability to destroy the entire Earth. However, 7 days is too short. It's not enough for us to find what you want us to find. Other than that, the target's appearance, characteristics, strength, and the situation all over the world, as well as the integration of the forces. It'll take at least a month to mobilize all the human forces to find the target. Mr. Li Onping, I'm not asking you to stop. I just hope that you can give us more time. It's impossible to complete the goal in 7 days." Hearing Metal Man's words, these superheroes were different from mortals after all, and they all reacted. Compared to the godlike power that Li Onping had just displayed, there was something that everyone had overlooked. That was Li Onping's communicability. Most people's attention was attracted by the power that was enough to destroy the earth, and they ignored the fact that since Li Onping had come to communicate with them, this matter should be negotiable. Communication, negotiation, probing, and compromise were what humans were best at. This might also be the only place where Earth could fight against the aliens in front of them. Night Eagle Man, who was at the side, also understood this when he heard Metal Man's words. At the same time, he also understood the first key point of communication, time. No matter what the people on Earth did next, time was the most critical point. 7 days was too short. Night Eagle Man added, "That's right. 7 days is too little. The United States is the strongest in this world, but other countries and forces might not necessarily listen to us. Furthermore, the demons have just attacked, and we've lost contact with many places. There's also the Crimson Alliance in the east. Their strength is comparable to ours, and they even surpass us in some aspects. We need more time to help you find target." Li Onping glanced at him and Metal Man with an unknown emotion in his eyes. "How long do you want?" Metal Man said heavily, "It will take us at least a year to integrate the forces on Earth, census the population, search for missing people, and finally find the target among all humans." After saying this, everyone, including Metal Man, looked nervously at Li Onping on the stage. Many people also looked at Metal Man with admiration. Not only did the other party remain calm and rational under a great threat, but he also stabilized people's hearts through continuous communication and told everyone that the crisis in front of them was not only a crisis, but also an opportunity. The so-called integration of the forces on Earth was just to make it easier for the alien to find the target. However, for everyone present, once the forces on Earth were integrated, those who helped Li Onping would be equivalent to God's messengers. Obviously, they could all hold high positions in the integrated forces on Earth. It would be even better if they could find the target of this alien and even get Li Onping's help in the process. With the power Li Onping had shown, even a small help from him would bring great benefits to the entire Earth. However, whether it was to resolve this crisis or turn it into an opportunity, the most important thing was the world. 7 days was definitely not enough. The question was whether Li Onping would agree to Metal Man's request and extend the time to 3 months. All the superheroes, Posen, and other high-ranking government officials looked at Li Onping nervously, waiting for his answer. Chapter 433. As everyone looked at Li Onping, the conference room fell silent. No one spoke. Everyone waited quietly for Li Onping's reply. The atmosphere was so heavy that it was as if water could seep out. 7 days is indeed to allow them to gather quickly. However, it's impossible to do it in 1 year. 1 year is enough for the Evil God Tribe and the Red River King to discover the situation here. It won't do if it's too short. He thought about his next plan, as well as Earth, the Red River King, and the Tide of Chaos. Finally, Li Onping said, 1 month. I can give you 1 month to do this. Seeing that Metal Man and Nighthawk Man still wanted to speak, he waved his hand and said, I'll help you with the matter of integrating the world's forces. When the time comes, all the human forces will have to listen to my arrangements and help me find the devil. Sensing the killing intent in Li Onping's mouth, no one, including Metal Man and Nighthawk Man, refuted him. However, Posen asked, How do you plan to help us? Li Onping said, On your planet, there are still 26 countries that have maintained their establishment under the attacks of the devils. 32 large cities have become strongholds to resist the devils. I'll take over all the countries and cities. All the surviving humans will live in these 32 large strongholds. Your goal is to find traces of the devil disguised as a human in the next period of time. Next, these superheroes and officials would use their influence and power to start notifying and integrating the entire Earth. As there were no longer demons and monsters blocking the way on the ground, the combined forces of the United States Army and superheroes were enough to wipe out most of the forces on Earth. Other than the Crimson Alliance in the East, they were a powerful force that could fight against the entire United States. They were even slightly stronger than the superheroes. Such a troublesome opponent would naturally be left to Li Onping to deal with personally. 5 hours later, in Beijing City in the morning, the four giants of the Crimson Alliance gathered once again. The only thing that could make them gather like this was a notice from the United States. After reading the notice, Qin Ning, the Saint martial artist, slammed his palm on the meeting table, leaving a giant palm print on it. Are these Americans tired of living? They actually want us to merge with them and accept the command of a strange person. What kind of joke is this? Young Dali, who was at the side, said, "But what about the tremors earlier? Not only Beijing, but Chongqing and Shanghai are also shaken. That alien thing can't be real, right? How could there be such a ridiculous thing? Destroying Earth?" Qin Ning said in disdain, "Do these Americans think we're stupid? They're trying to take advantage of the fact that the number of monsters is decreasing to devour us." He turned around and looked at the immortal king, Yi Feng, and asked, "Boss, what do you think? I think we should just bring some people and fight them. That League of Legends has always been an eyesore to me." "That's good." Yang Dali became excited. "I just spent money to make a bunch of Jagu. I was worried that I didn't have a place to use them." Hearing Yang Dali and Qin Ning's clamor, Yi Feng frowned and did not say anything. As an existence who had once reached the peak of the immortal cultivation world, he had indeed sensed the disappearance of the lunar power, which was also the departure of the moon. If it was in his previous life, he naturally would not care about the so-called aliens. However, in this life, he only had the power of a golden core. Facing an alien who might be able to capture the stars and the moon, he was still somewhat lacking in confidence. Furthermore, he did not wish to reveal his trump card too early. This made him feel even more conflicted. Hearing Yang Dali and Qin Ning's urging, Yi Feng looked at the last person in the Crimson Alliance and asked, "Zhang Ao, what do you think?" That young man, who spent most of his time in meetings resting with his eyes closed and spoke no more than 10 sentences in a month, was the last big shot of the Crimson Alliance. He was also the person Yi Feng could not see through the most. What Yi Feng did not know was that the reason why he could not see through Zhang Ao was that Zhang Ao did not belong to this world. He had transmigrated here after being struck by a bolt of lightning. Fists dominated the mainland with strength. The people who cultivated on the mainland were known as weightlifters. The weightlifters were divided into 6 stages: Strength Master, Strength Warrior, Strength Master, Strength Supreme, Strength Grandmaster, and Strength Emperor. When the strength of one's fist exceeded 100 million Jin, one would be known as the Fist Emperor. The genius young man, Zhang Ao, met with an accident when he was 5 years old. It was tested that his fist strength would never exceed 10 Jin, and he was despised and looked down upon by his entire family. However, after a bolt of lightning, he realized that he had attained the innate divine strength physique, which was hard to come by in 10,000 years. Let's see how the young man, Zhang Ao, will break through the heavens with his fist and become the Fist Emperor of his generation. However, it was a pity that before Zhang Ao could write his legend, he realized that he had arrived on Earth, in the Qin nation, after the bolt of lightning. Thereafter, with his divine strength, he gradually gained a foothold in the Qin nation. In the end, he even took advantage of the frenzy brought by the demons and became one of the 4 big shots of the Crimson Alliance. He was known as the Crimson Leader. Hearing Yi Feng ask for his opinion, Zhang Ao gave it some thought and said, "Those who offend my brothers will be killed no matter how far away they are. Since the Hero Alliance wants to engulf us, then they must be prepared to be engulfed by us." Hearing that Zhang Ao agreed with their opinion, both Qin Ning and Yang Dali cheered. They were just waiting for Yi Feng's order to lead their brothers to attack. Just then, the entire base suddenly trembled. At the next moment, a tremendous power that was hard to calculate gushed out from above the 4 of them, blasting a hole with a diameter of over 500 meters in the entire base. 1 minute ago, Li Onping had already appeared in the sky above Beiping City. According to the information provided by the metal man William, The Crimson Alliance's headquarters was over 800 meters below him. Right now, the four big shots of the Crimson Alliance should be discussing the news sent by the Hero Alliance. Li Onping's eyes pierced through the layers of cement, sand, and steel bars. He saw Yi Feng, Qin Ning, Jiang Ao, and Yang Dali. He then pointed his right hand in the direction of the Crimson Alliance's base. These four fellows all have terrible personalities. Seems like simple persuasion and threats won't be effective. I can only give them a beating first. He spread out his 5 fingers, and as his 5 fingers slowly opened up, the countless Crimson Alliance staff members in the base seemed to be pulled by an invisible force. They were all picked up like ants, and in a short 10 or so seconds, they were all picked up and sent out of the base. Li Onping then pressed down gently with a finger in the direction of the Crimson Alliance's headquarters, where only Yi Feng and the other 3 were left. As Li Onping pressed down with his finger, a thumbprint the size of a cruise ship suddenly appeared on the ground over 800 meters away. All the steel bars and cement were crushed by Li Onping's finger across space, and a huge hole appeared before Yi Feng and the other 3. It looked as if a child had opened up an ant's nest. Who dares to attack the Crimson Alliance's headquarters? You're courting death. The first to make a move was Qin Ning. Having the Saint Samurai in the game, he could unleash all of the Saint Samurai's abilities through Saint Samurai possession. He let out a furious bellow and leaped up, punching toward Li Onping across space. Heaven and Earth Overlord Fist. Milky white battle chi gathered on Qin Ning's fist, emitting waves of light like a small sun. As Qin Ning let out this explosive bellow, the ball of battle chi, which had expanded to the size of a door, shot out toward Li Onping in the sky like a missile. This is bad. I used my full power in this punch. There's no one left alive. Just as this thought flashed through Qin Ning's mind, a stream of white air current suddenly condensed and took form in the sky. At the next moment, Qin Ning knew that he was wrong. Faced with Qin Ning's Heaven and Earth Overlord Fist, Li Onping did not even look at it. He allowed the ball of battle chi to hit his back like a gentle breeze, not leaving behind any injuries at all. Li Onping looked at the 4 people under his feet and slapped out his palm once again. As the atmosphere exploded, the power had turned into a huge white palm using the white air as a medium. It slapped down fiercely toward the Crimson Alliance's base like a 5-fingered mountain. Before the huge palm arrived, the pressing violent air had already pressed down toward Qin Ning, who had leaped into midair. He opened his mouth, but realized that strong gales were gushing in, making it impossible for him to make any sound. This was a secret martial art that Li Onping had used his physical strength to control the atmosphere and condense it into form, the Sumeru palm. To the current Feng Xinjian, this could only be considered a greeting at most. However, the power it contained was already no different from the collision of a 1,000,000-ton mountain. Accompanied by the explosive sounds from the friction between the atmosphere, the Sumeru palm smashed down fiercely toward the Crimson Alliance's base with a prowess that was like thunderbolts, tsunamis, and tempests. It was as if it wanted to wipe out the base completely. Under this palm, if there were other people in the base, they would be shaken to death, even if they were hiding 10 kilometers underground. Seeing that the huge white palm had already arrived before him, milky white battle chi burst out from Qin Ning's body, forming strong gales around him and dispersing the pressure from the atmosphere. With a furious bellow, Qin Ning punched out with both his fists toward the huge palm that was descending from the sky. However, the moment Qin Ning's fist came into contact with the huge palm formed from the air, he immediately regretted it. He had a deep understanding of what it meant to be an ant trying to shake a tree, a mantis trying to stop a chariot, and overestimating one's capabilities. It was as if Mount Tai had come crashing down from the sky. Qin Ning's attack did not even delay the Sumeru palm for a single second. He felt intense pain in his hands, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. It was like a human-shaped fly, slapped down fiercely toward the ground. The Sumeru palm in the sky did not delay at all and continued smashing toward the Crimson Alliance's base. Chapter 434. Facing the five-finger mountain that descended from the sky, facing the mountain-like power that was equivalent to a mountain peak pressing down, the remaining three people in the conference room did not panic. Yang Dali had already put on a set of red armor. With a leap, he caught the falling Qin Ning in his arms. On the other side, Immortal King Yifeng looked at the huge palm descending from the sky and snorted coldly. Then he formed a sword seal with both palms, and a wave of spiritual power spurted out from the golden core in his body. Almighty Heavenly Dragon, revered Xitigarbha, Clang. A line of fire shot out from his sword fingers and rushed into the sky. At first, it was a line of fire, but in an instant, it turned into a fire snake. In the end, it turned into a huge fire dragon that charged towards the huge palm in the sky without any regard for its own safety. The fire dragon roared and collided with the palm with a bang. However, although the dragon's body was about the size of a train, when faced with Li Onping's Sumeru palm, it was as if Buddha had reached out to slap a small earthworm to death. As if it had a mind of its own, the fire dragon let out a series of miserable cries as it was pushed back by the huge palm in the sky. "Oomph!" Yifeng sneered, and his sword fingers changed again. "Resist!" Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Rolling heat waves rushed over, and another 8 fire dragons darted out from Yifeng's body, flying towards the huge palm in the sky. There were a total of 9 fire dragons, each curling around the fingers, the back of the palm, and the palm. The high temperature and fire almost dyed the sky of Ping Bay City red. The air around the huge white palm distorted under the stimulation of the high temperature. Although the 9 fire dragons were unable to block the power of the Sumeru palm, they used the method of heating the air to dissolve the Sumeru palm bit by bit. Even so, Immortal King Yifeng was already shocked enough. These 9 fire dragons were refined by him using the immortal fire that he had collected from the chaos bead, let alone ordinary steel. Even burning mountains and boiling seas would not be a problem. However, in the face of the other party's huge palm, the 9 dragons barely blocked it. How could Yifeng not be shocked? What a powerful fellow. It seems that I have to use my full strength. On the other side, Immortal King Yifeng was neutralizing Li Onping's Sumeru palm. On the other side, Jiang Ao left a trail of afterimages and screeches behind him. Like a cannonball, he charged towards Li Onping in the sky at lightning speed. Jiang Ao's combat experience was indeed rich for him to be able to rush out the instant Yifeng dispelled the Sumeru palm. What made him even more proud was that his right fist was filled with enough power to topple mountains and overturn seas. Strength was his life. Fist overturns the world. He punched out. A sonic boom rang out. This was a punch that had surpassed the speed of sound. It carried Jiang Ao's incomparable confidence and conviction as it charged toward Li Onping's chest. However, Jiang Ao's punch was destined to fail because his opponent's strength had far exceeded his imagination. It was an existence that he could not understand at all and could not contend against. Li Onping didn't even look at Jiang Ao, who was sprinting towards him in midair. There was no killing intent, no background, and he couldn't even feel anything. There was no way for him to defend himself. Jiang Ao's body trembled as if he was struck by lightning. His entire body was covered in blood. He was sent flying back at a speed faster than the speed at which he charged forward. How is this possible? He didn't feel how Li Onping attacked him at all. It was as if he had been punched in the chest by an invisible force. Jiang Ao felt that his injuries were serious. In a short exchange, just now, his sternum was broken. Almost every time he breathed, he would gasp in pain. However, just as he flew for more than 500 meters in the sky, his entire body was dragged in the opposite direction by a powerful force, and then stopped. It was as if a sports car at 200 kilometers per hour had braked forcefully on the highway. The huge dislocation caused him to spit out a mouthful of blood again. His face was pale as he fell to the ground. He saw Qin Ning and Jiang Ao being knocked down in an instant. Immortal King Yifeng's eyes were solemn as he pointed with his sword. 9 fire dragons rushed towards Li Onping in the sky. Boundless heaven and earth, borrow the power of the universe. He shouted, Dali, go all out. A purple light shot out from between his eyebrows. It was a small purple sword that was 3 inches long. The small sword was made of a purple crystal. As soon as it appeared, the temperature within a radius of 1,000 meters seemed to drop rapidly. A thick murderous aura also shot into the sky with the appearance of the small sword, poking a big hole in the clouds in the sky. As the sword pointed in Li Onping's direction, the air was cut open like cheese. Just the tip of the sword was pointed at Li Onping's body, but one could see with the naked eye that the air between the two of them seemed to be cut open by a blade, forming a vacuum corridor. This sword was called Immortal Piercing. Wen Yifeng was an immortal lord. He spent thousands of years, countless heavenly materials and earthly treasures, and countless days and months to refine this natal flying sword with the wume, divine fire, and rare treasures of heaven and earth. Even in the entire 9 heavens immortal world, it was ranked in the top 20. Although Yifeng, who was only in the golden core stage, could not unleash even 1% of the immortal piercing sword's power, it was already an invincible force for most people on this planet. The purple immortal piercing flying sword made a soft whoosh sound and disappeared in an instant. In the next instant, it appeared on Li Onping's forehead. At the same time, the sword burned with purple flames and pierced towards Li Onping's forehead. On the other side, after Yang Dali heard Yi Feng's order, countless holes opened from head to toe in his red armor. In the next moment, hundreds of missiles were launched. The target was Li Onping in the sky. Seeing the purple flying sword suddenly appear in front of him, Li Onping's eyes revealed a rare look of surprise. He was not surprised by the power of the immortal piercing sword, but because this was the first time he saw a flying sword attack like this. It was also the first time he saw the way the power inside the flying sword worked. However, in the face of the immortal piercing sword that could pierce through a battleship in an instant, Li Onping still did not react. He just let the flying sword stab toward his forehead. The tip of the sword, which was burning with purple flames, collided with Li Onping's smooth forehead. The collision of power caused invisible sound waves to spread in all directions. However, neither the purple flames nor the sword tip of the immortal piercing sword could hurt Li Onping at all. Even his skin was not damaged at all. In the next moment, the shock wave caused by the collision of the two forces swept out in all directions with the sword tip and the forehead as the center. Wherever the shock wave passed, the air would crackle from time to time, as if there was thunder in the sky. This was caused by an extremely powerful force that exploded the air. The shock wave not only exploded the air, but also the small missiles that Yang Dali had launched. The 9 fire dragons that Yifeng had summoned earlier were completely destroyed as if they were rotten wood. All the missiles and fire dragons surrounded Li Onping's position. Before they could get within 10 meters of him, they were all hit by the shock wave and turned into sparks. In the end, it was like a huge ring of fire surrounded Li Onping. The immortal piercing sword did not hurt him. Instead, it was hit by Li Onping's forehead. A small crack appeared on the sword, and Li Onping held it in his hand. When Yifeng felt Li Onping holding the immortal piercing sword, he immediately controlled the immortal piercing sword to release countless sword auras, trying to break free from Li Onping's control. However, the immortal piercing sword in Li Onping's hand was like a fish that had been caught. No matter how it struggled, it could not shake off Li Onping's hand. On the other hand, Li Onping's right hand gently squeezed. The immortal piercing sword, full of spirituality, let out a wail, and a few more cracks appeared on the sword. As Yifeng's natal magic treasure, he immediately felt a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Then, with a poof, he spat out a large mouthful of blood. However, his eyes were still fixed on Li Onping in the sky. His eyes were filled with disbelief and disbelief. This was the first time he had seen someone use their forehead to block a flying sword. In the end, the flying sword was the one that was injured. What was even more ridiculous was that Li Onping's right hand was holding the flying sword, almost crushing it. This was the most ridiculous thing that Yifeng had ever seen. Moreover, This was not an ordinary flying sword. It was one of the top 20 flying swords in the Nine Heavens immortal world. Not only was the sword incomparably sharp, but it also had the power to kill ghosts and destroy gods after transforming into a rainbow. The purple flames attached to it also had the ability to penetrate and burn all restrictions and barriers. However, Yifeng knew very well that Feng Xingjian had not used any special powers at all. Feng Xingjian had only used his physical strength to block his flying sword. Even when Yifeng had gone through the Nine Heavens Thunder Tribulation in his previous life, the immortal piercing sword had not been damaged. However, it had now been damaged by a mortal's violence. How was he supposed to fight against such a monster? Yifeng waved his hand to stop Yang Dali, who was restless and wanted to attack again. He casually cast 2 sweet rain incantations to heal Jiang Ao and Qin Ning, who were still groaning on the ground. Then, he looked at Li Anping, who was slowly descending from the sky. He said with an expression that was worse than crying, "Who on earth are you? Do you have any grudges with our Crimson Alliance? I'm the alien that the League of Legends mentioned in the information that they gave you. You can call me Li Anping." Li Anping casually let go of the immortal piercing sword in his hand. This flying sword, whose name had shaken the entire Nine Heaven celestial world, was now like a stray dog. It quickly fled and darted into Yi Feng's Naiwen Palace in between his brows. From the way the purple shadow was trembling, the 4 people present could sense that this flying sword seemed to be afraid. Li Anping continued to say, "I don't have any grudges with your Crimson Alliance. It's just that I want to gather all the human influences on Earth to help me find traces of demons. It's the same for your Crimson Alliance." Yang Dali, who was at the side, mustered up his courage and said, "But there's no need to start a fight right from the start, right?" Li Anping threw a glance at Yang Dali, and countless streams of distorted electromagnetic fields were born in the surroundings of Yang Dali's red armor. At the next moment, countless electromagnetic forces took effect on Yang Dali's armor, and it instantly disintegrated into the smallest parts and dropped onto the ground. Yang Dali looked at the armor on the ground, and then looked at Li Anping as if he had seen a ghost. Without the protection of his powers, Yang Dali was filled with a sense of insecurity as he faced this alien with his mortal body. He did not dare to say anything else, and merely looked at Li Anping in fear. "Considering your Crimson Alliance's past experiences and the characters of the 4 of you, it's better for us to fight before we talk." Yifeng smiled bitterly and did not say anything. However, he knew that Feng Xingjian was right. In the Crimson Alliance, especially Jiang Ao, Yang Dali, and Qin Ning, each of them had become famous at a young age. They were proud and arrogant, and they were used to being arrogant and willful. They had always listened to whoever had the bigger fist. In their past experiences, they had always been the ones with the bigger fist. However, after this exchange of greetings, the 4 of them looked at Li Anping with astonishment and fear. In their eyes, the current Li Anping had become a monster among monsters. However, they did not know that the power Li Anping had displayed earlier was not even 1/10, 0.000th of his full power. After throwing a glance at the 4 of them, Li Anping said, "Then from the Crimson Alliance's side, there shouldn't be any problems if you agree to listen to my commands, right?" Yifeng looked at the broken walls and the surroundings, then at Jiang Ao, Qin Ning, and Yifeng who were on ground. "Understood. We'll listen to your commands from now on." Chapter 435. Hearing Yifeng's words, Jiang Ao and Qin Ning, who were lying on the ground, felt their blood surging. Their faces flushed red, feeling that they had never been humiliated like this in their entire lives. They wanted to rush up and tear Li Anping apart, but they knew that they were unable to do so. It was because the abilities that Li Anping had displayed were too powerful and terrifying. Qin Ning thought for a moment, and a hint of dejection flashed on his face. Even Yifeng had given in. What could he do? "Wait a minute, I have something to say." On the other side, Jiang Ao slowly stood up and looked at Li Anping with bloodshot eyes. "Li Anping, you've humiliated me today, but I can't do anything about it. It's because you're much stronger than me. Do you dare to make a bet with me? Let's fight again 10 years later. By then, our lives and deaths will be up to fate. Li Onping looked at him, as if he could instantly see through his past, future, and inner world. He said calmly, "You won't be able to surpass me. It doesn't matter if it's 10 years, 100 years, or even 10,000 years." But, just as he said those two words, a stream of white light suddenly appeared on Li Onping's fingertip. At the next moment, it darted into Jiang Ao's body at lightning speed before the four people present could react. Jiang Ao looked at his body and said furiously, "Li Onping, what did you do to me? Are you afraid of my potential and want to kill me?" Li Onping shook his head. "Didn't you want to make a bet? There's no need for such a troublesome duel. I'm about 3 quadrillion times stronger than you. That stream of light earlier will explode 10 years later. If you want to withstand it, you don't need to be 3 quadrillion times stronger. You just need to be 100 million times stronger than you are now." The words 100 million times were like 3 huge rocks that pressed down on Jiang Ao's heart, causing his face to turn pale. In the end, he shook his head in disbelief. "Impossible. You're lying to me. How can there be such a huge difference between us?" Yi Feng walked up and patted him on the shoulder, stopping him from continuing. He said to Li Onping, "What do you need us to do next? The Crimson Alliance has 4 large strongholds. I want you to bring all the remaining humans in the Red Nation's territory to these 4 large strongholds within a week." Yi Feng frowned when he heard that, but he still said, "We can do that, but with such a large territory, I'm afraid we can't do it in such a short time." Li Onping opened his hand, and in the next moment, countless storms appeared in the sky. All kinds of particles in the air changed their structure, transforming into all kinds of particles that Li Onping wanted. It wasn't just the air that was being transformed. Li Onping's body also surged with boundless energy. This energy was directly transformed into all kinds of substances. This was the transformation of mass and energy, a method of void creation. Iron, carbon, copper, gold, silver. All kinds of elements kept on combining and combining together according to the blueprint in Li Onping's mind. A huge aircraft carrier slowly appeared before the 4 of them. "There are a total of 32 strongholds in the world, and I'll build 12 aircraft carriers for each stronghold. 6 of them will be used to guard the stronghold, while the other 6 will be used to rescue victims all over the world. The aircraft carriers here will be completed by tomorrow. They have auxiliary artificial intelligence, and you can just choose a team of soldiers to operate them. I'll provide the locations of all your refugees through the artificial intelligence." Looking at the aircraft carriers that were gradually appearing in the sky, Yi Feng's countenance became increasingly grim. On one hand, it was because of Li Onping's ability to turn rocks into gold and create objects out of thin air. This was something that Yi Feng did not even have when he was an immortal in his previous life. Li Onping's strength was much stronger than he had imagined. On the other hand, the existence of the 12 aircraft carriers meant that Li Onping would be able to monitor all the strongholds at all times. Right now, there were about 1 billion people left in the world. If you were to bring all of them to the large strongholds, each stronghold would have to carry a population of 30 million people. This would be a huge pressure, and it would also mean that all humans would be under Li Onping's surveillance and control. However, Li Onping did not care whether Yi Feng's countenance was grim or not. He continued, "In terms of food and resources, I'll make them once a month and provide them to all the strongholds. You don't have to worry about this." How could Yi Feng not be worried? Food and resources were the 2 most important things in the apocalyptic world. By doing this, Li Onping was ruthlessly pinching their Achilles heel. Yi Feng could not help but wonder if his true goal was to look for the devil. After explaining the following arrangements, Li Onping's figure flashed and turned into a beam of white light, disappearing into the horizon. Only his voice was still transmitted to the 4 people's ears. "If there's anything, I'll contact you." The 4 of them looked at the floating aircraft carrier in the sky that was still being automatically assembled, and their countenances were abnormally grim. This was especially so for Jiang Ao, who had wanted to make a bet with Li Onping earlier. Right now, As he looked at the aircraft carrier in the sky that was getting increasingly larger, his countenance was so grim that it seemed as if it could drip water. Recalling what Li Onping had said to him earlier, he had a strong feeling that he had been caught in a trap of his own making. Seeing Li Onping continuously walking around the various major cities on Earth, Black said, feeling a little bored, "Li Onping, although your powers have improved so much, your thoughts are still so boring. If you want to capture that level 8 evil God Tribe's warrior, just smash this planet into smithereens. Why do you have to go through so much trouble? Even if you don't wish to smash this planet into smithereens, you could just follow your earlier method and create more machines. The efficiency of robots is much higher than that of humans." Li Onping said coldly, "Humans are complicated creatures. Too many machines will arouse their rebellious nature, causing them to be repulsed by the task of gathering disaster victims. Moreover, the key to finding Rachnos has nothing to do with the number of machines. I've already scanned all the humans and their body structures on this planet long ago. There's no reaction at all. Previously, that guy's form after he reincarnated was that of a human. However, he was the one who released his powers to lure me over. This time around, he's concealed his powers and changed his body structure to be exactly the same as a human's." Li Onping frowned. Right now, the only way to distinguish him is through a memory scan. What Li Onping did not mention was that the memory scan was a method to speed up his godhood process. It would be fine if there were only one or two of them. However, if there would be a global memory scan, it was very likely that it would cause his self-awareness to become blurry or even create confusion in his memories. This would probably speed up his godhood process greatly. Right now, Black did not know that Li Onping had become so strong that he could scan the memories of everyone on an entire planet. He merely smiled coldly and said, "Then what do you plan to do next? Get those humans to listen to your instructions, find everyone, and gather them at 32 strongholds? That's just the first step. Since he wants to play, I'll play with him." Li Onping said faintly, "There are still 40 billion people left on this planet. I'll find him among them." "Oh, aren't you worried that he's hiding and wants to call for backup? If Red comes, you won't have it easy. If he can find the portal, he can naturally contact his own people." Li Onping looked at the sky. The portal that he moved away from had long left Earth's orbit. It was about 2 million kilometers away from where he was now. However, as long as he can't find the portal and doesn't have the ability to cross multiple universes, he won't be able to contact life in another universe. He's just a turtle in a jar now. "Oh, it seems that you've hidden the portal very well." Halfway through his words, Black reacted. He let out a cold laugh and said, "Kid, are you testing me again?" Li Onping had said earlier that he did not have the ability to cross multiple universes. Naturally, this meant that the evil God Tribe's warriors would not be able to contact the Red River King. However, this also meant that the evil God Tribe, including the Red River King, would not be able to contact Rachnos either. From Black's answer, it was as if he had tacitly agreed to this. This meant that the Red River King had indeed not cleared the dimensional barrier among the 3 stages of the 9th energy level. Black tempted once again, "Li Onping, do you want to know what Red's ability is? Just ask me directly. There's no need to sound me out in a roundabout way. There are many deals we can make. Not only Red, but I can also tell you about the other demonic gods. How about it? Give me all the humans on this planet, and I'll tell you one of Red's abilities." "I won't do something like that." The corners of Li Onping's lips suddenly curled up slightly. "Moreover, this planet isn't as ordinary as you think." Chapter 436. In the following period of time, a total of 32 strongholds across the globe were all monitored and guarded by the floating aircraft carriers. Under the unified command of Li Onping, the governments of the various regions piloted the remaining floating aircraft carriers to rescue the remaining refugees who were still alive in the wild. With Li Onping's ability to scan over half of the planet, the governments saved the effort of conducting a large-scale search. They only needed to pilot the floating aircraft carriers to the designated locations and bring the refugees over. However, during this process, all sorts of problems in the apocalypse were exposed. Countless criminals were sentenced to death. Early morning, in the southwestern region of the former Chi country, in a police station that used to be, 5 men in ragged clothes were staring at a pot of thick soup. Their eyes emitted a faint green glow. They had been trapped here for over 3 months. Regardless of whether it was food, medicine, or other resources, they had all been depleted. Their lives had come to an end. One of them, a burly man with a full beard and a bird's nest hairstyle, said, "Who's going today?" He looked at the thinnest man among the 5 men, and his eyes emitted a murky glow. That thin man said fiercely, "What are you looking at me for? I've already been there yesterday." He turned his head and said to a tall and thin man with a yellowish complexion, "Zhao Qian, it's your turn today. If you still don't go today, you can forget about having dinner." The tall and thin man by the name of Zhao Qian shook his head anxiously. "No, don't let me go. There are monsters outside. I'll die if I go out." "Someone has to go out," the bearded man said. "Are we just going to sit here and wait for death?" "Brother June." The yellowish Zhao Qian sneaked a glance at one of the windows of the police station and said softly, "If there's really no other way, at most." Brother June interrupted Zhao Qian. "All right, that's enough." Although Zhao Qian's words were interrupted by Brother June, the 5 men clearly knew what Zhao Qian wanted to say. They would occasionally look at the window that Zhao Qian was looking at, and the green glow in their eyes became even more intense. The thinnest man stood up and said in a low voice, "I need to go to the toilet." Then he left the bonfire. Brother June did not suspect anything and casually said, "Hurry up and go. If you're late, I won't give you any soup." He stood up, picked up the ladle and the pot, and began to share the soup with the others. In the thick soup, there were a few pieces of vegetable leaves and half of a rat's head that had been cooked for who knows how long. Even so, it was the last food that the 5 people could eat. Seeing Brother June start to divide the soup and rat meat in the pot, the other 3 men's eyes lit up. "Brother June, can you give me more? I went out to look for food yesterday." "What the hell are you looking for? We didn't even walk 100 meters before we were scared back. If I hadn't caught a rat last week, we would all be starving today. What about Li Tang? Why isn't he here yet? If he doesn't come, we'll just split his share." Just as they were talking, an ear-piercing female scream suddenly rang out. Brother June was the first to put down the pot and ran towards the source of the scream without hesitation. Brother June pushed the door and found that it was locked from the inside. So, without saying a word, he kicked the door open with his right foot. With a bang, the locked door was completely kicked open. Inside the room, 2 skinny girls were hiding in the corner, trembling. Their eyes were fixed on the thin man pressing one of the girls onto the bed, his hands tightly gripping the girl's neck. The girl's body kept twisting and kicking, but because of long-term malnutrition, lack of food and exercise, her strength was pitifully small. 2 firewood-like arms grabbed the thin man's hand, but it was like an ant trying to shake a tree. It was impossible to stop the man's violence. The thin man's eyes were green as he stared at the girl in his hand. His eyes looked as scary as a hungry wolf on the grassland. "Are you crazy?" Brother June shouted angrily. He rushed up and kicked the violent thin man away. He helped the girl, whose eyes had turned white, up and asked, "Are you okay?" The thin man stood up and shouted crazily, "I'm crazy, you're crazy. Now that the whole world is over, why are you still pretending to be a good person? If we don't eat them, we won't be able to live. Look at One-Eyed Dragon, their women and children have all been eaten. If we don't eat, they will snatch them away too. Not only are we not eating them, but we also have to feed them every day. This will kill us." With a loud slap, Brother June slapped the thin man to the ground. He said angrily, "I don't care what others do, but I can't do it." The thin and weak man was quite strong-willed. After being slapped, he stood up without saying a word and silently walked out the door. At this time, the other 3 men were already standing outside the door. The skinny man pushed them aside and walked out. He didn't say a word during the whole process. Brother June sighed. "He's too hungry. It's okay, let's go." That night, everyone gathered together again to drink the rat soup that no longer had any taste of meat. During dinner, other than a few others, the other four men's green eyes would occasionally glance at the room where the three women were. Brother June sighed in his heart. He knew that what the thin man did today had aroused the desire in the hearts of the others. Even he felt the stirring of hunger in his stomach from time to time. He would have similar thoughts, let alone them. When will this world end? Just as Brother June was thinking about this, a dazed feeling suddenly swept across his mind. Not good. Just as he felt that something was wrong, drowsiness surged through his body like a tsunami. Brother June could only see the other four men's eyes mixed with hunger, cruelty, and bloodthirst before he fainted. He didn't know whether it was minutes or hours. In a daze, Brother June could only hear the excited laughter of the men and the ear-piercing screams of the women. He finally woke up. He used a little strength, but found that his hands and feet were all tied up. A hand pressed on his shoulder. Brother June turned his head to look. The man swallowed and said to him, "Brother June, don't move." Brother June looked around and found that other than himself being tied up, a man was looking at him, another man was boiling water, and Zhao Qian was sharpening a knife on the other side. From time to time, they would look at him with undisguised malice in their eyes. From the direction of the room, where the three girls were, weak screams and violent roars of men could be heard from time to time. Brother June's heart sank bit by bit. How long has he been in there? Zhao Qian glanced at Brother June and said, "He just went in less than half a minute. We only gave you a little anesthetic. You've only slept for 5 minutes. Don't worry, Li Tang won't kill them." He seemed to feel sorry for Brother June. As he sharpened the knife, he explained, "Brother June, if you hadn't brought us all the way out, we would have died in the mouths of those monsters. We'll remember your kindness for the rest of our lives. We wanted to eat those 3 women with you, but you refused. We couldn't do anything about it." As he spoke, tears fell from the corners of the man's eyes. He looked at the sharp kitchen knife in his hand with empty eyes. "We're really hungry. We're really hungry. We really want to eat. If we don't eat, we'll die." Brother June. Zhao Qian turned his head to look at Brother June, who was tied up on the ground. The madness and bloodthirst in his eyes made everyone frown. "Although you saved us, you can't let us die with you. I'll kill whoever doesn't let me live." After shouting these words crazily, he slowly walked over and aimed the kitchen knife at Brother June's neck. The other 2 men also walked up, one on the left and one on the right. They pressed down on Brother June's body. "Brother June, don't worry. You won't feel any pain after one cut." Brother June closed his eyes, his heart filled with despair. He thought that it was good to die like this. In the current world, there was no point in living. The meat on his body should be enough for them to eat for a week or 2. At this moment, a loud roar entered everyone's ears. Brother June only felt a chill on his head, as if something had been sprinkled on his forehead. He couldn't help but open his eyes. He saw Zhao Qian, who was holding the kitchen knife up high, looking at him in a daze. There was a huge bloody hole on his forehead, and white and red liquid kept flowing out. Plop, 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 plop. There were 3 consecutive sounds. Other than Zhao Qian, the other 2 men also collapsed. The red blood turned into a pool of blood in the blink of an eye. Brother June looked up, and his face was filled with shock. A huge aircraft carrier was floating above their heads, and its huge shadow covered the surrounding streets. Over 10 soldiers rushed in from the entrance of the police station. They were the ones who fired the shots. One of the soldiers took out a dagger and cut open the ropes binding Brother June. He patted his shoulder and said, "We know what happened to you guys. Good job, you're a man. It's all over now. We're here to take you back." Hearing this, Brother June, who had always been like a tough guy on the silver screen, who didn't shed a single tear even before he was killed, finally couldn't help but tear up. The nightmare was finally over. At this moment, a skinny man who had just taken off his shirt and was only wearing a pair of tattered pants walked out of the room. He looked at the airship and the soldiers in the sky in a daze and started laughing loudly. "We're saved! We're saved!" Bang! Bang! The bullet pierced through his head and opened his skull. The thin man fell to the ground in a daze, still with a stunned expression on his face. Brother June seemed to have thought of something. He grabbed the soldier beside him and said, "South." In the supermarket 2 kilometers south, the soldier patted his shoulder and said, "Don't worry. You're the last batch in the world. We've already killed those bastards in the supermarket." Thinking about what he had seen in the south, a trace of anger and helplessness flashed in the soldier's eyes. The attack of the devil had caused too many tragedies. The rescue team had already seen all kinds of tragedies in the human world. A small stronghold like Brother June's was already very lucky. There were many other strongholds, but now there was only a group of lunatics and murderers left. Other than being executed on the spot, there was no other result. Brother June boarded the aircraft carrier and realized that the hull on the aircraft carrier seemed to be a place where some kind of weapon was placed. It was already filled with hundreds of refugees. Most of them looked dispirited and skinny, but they held the buns given by the soldiers in their hands. Their eyes were filled with the joy of surviving a disaster. Brother June looked at the 3 little girls behind him who were following him closely. According to the military doctor, although Brother June took care of them and prevented them from being harmed, the desperate situation of hunger and cold for a long time still made the 3 of them suffer too much. They already treated Brother June as the closest person. At this moment, the screen in the hall suddenly flashed, and a man in white appeared on the screen. Everyone in the hall, whether soldiers or refugees, was attracted by the image on the screen. They looked at the man in white and said calmly, "Just a minute ago, all the surviving humans have been rescued. Then, according to the previous plan, we can start drawing numbers." The next moment, a huge turntable behind the man in white began to spin. Brother June didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the surrounding soldiers were all looking at the turntable on the screen very nervously. Their eyes were filled with anger and fear, as if something very bad was about to happen. Chapter 437. Tokyo, Japan. As a country without armed forces, Japan suffered heavy losses in the attack of the demon tide. If it weren't for the heroes of Japan uniting to fight against the demons, the whole of Japan would have become a gourmet paradise for the demons, and Japan would have become a deserted, scorched land. However, even if the heroes desperately protected Japan, they could only establish a large stronghold in Tokyo, which was one of the 32 large strongholds owned by humans in the world. At present, more than 25 million Japanese were stationed there. Just yesterday, the big wheel that Li Onping was spinning stopped at the number representing Tokyo. After repeating his military force and the ownership of the aircraft carrier in the sky, everyone already knew the power that Li Onping represented. Now, the whole of Tokyo had fallen into chaos. Fires, car accidents, and robberies were endless. Everyone seemed to have fallen into some kind of doomsday carnival. The major traffic thoroughfares, as well as the entrances and exits of Tokyo, were densely packed with steel defenses. Anyone who approached, whether ordinary citizens or soldiers, will be covered by a violent storm of bullets. At this moment, as if the end of the world had come again, on the 54-story roof of the tallest building in Tokyo, Midtown Tower, Li Onping, dressed in white, was standing quietly on the edge of the roof, looking coldly at the city of Tokyo that had fallen into chaos. The source of all this chaos was only because of a few words he said. At this moment, an armed helicopter quickly flew toward Li Onping. After seeing Li Onping, he launched 16 rockets in a row without saying a word. The 16 rockets were like 16 brilliant fireworks, rushing toward Li Onping's location. But these rockets were at most fireworks for Li Onping. Watching the 16 rockets fly in the air, they were directly disintegrated into a cloud of powder that was difficult to be seen by the naked eye and disappeared. The pilot of the armed helicopter roared, frantically pressing the button of the rocket, aiming all the remaining rockets at Li Onping. At the same time, he drove the helicopter directly toward Li Onping on the roof. He made it clear that he wanted to die together with Liu Boyan. But the result was no different from the previous 16 rockets. They were also disintegrated into countless of the most basic atoms. This was already the 14th wave of people who came to this building to attack Li Onping today. Just as he was thinking about this, an armor-piercing bullet fired by a sniper rifle appeared in front of Li Onping's forehead. Under the rapid flow of time, Li Onping could still slowly raise his right hand, catch the bullet in his palm, and then he looked at the building in the distance. In a room on a certain floor of the building, the sniper saw Li Onping unscathed through the scope and immediately threw the sniper rifle, wanting to leave immediately. But as soon as he raised his feet, and the entire floor was empty. It wasn't just a simple floor, but the entire building collapsed under Li Onping's gaze. At this time, there was still 1 hour and 52 minutes left before Li Onping's agreed time. 5 minutes later, a black-clothed, black-haired man walked up to the rooftop. He held a silver-white pistol in his hand, pointed it at Li Onping, and said, "Hey, do you think you are King Piccolo?" Li Onping did not move, and he did not turn his head because he did not need to do so. He could already see everything happening behind him. "Are you this country's so-called hero? I saved all humans. What's wrong with killing some of them now? It's none of my business how many people you kill and how many people you save. But destroying Tokyo has touched my reverse scale. This alone is the reason for your disappearance." After saying this, the man pulled the trigger, and an energy comparable to 22 million tons of Teamonton explosives instantly exploded. However, a white light flashed, and the imagined big explosion did not happen. Li Onping held the terrifying energy in his hand and turned it into a small white bead. Li Onping said, "Did you skip the annihilation reaction directly? That's a good method of converting mass and energy. You should be the strongest person in this country. You don't have any other means?" Seeing the other party's dumbfounded expression, Li Onping said, "Then you can die now." Before he could finish his words, the other party's body was disintegrated in an instant. Just like this, another half an hour passed. Ordinary citizens and heroes came to attack Li Onping one after another, but the results were naturally the same. In the last minute, the entire city had fallen into the final madness. Li Onping also began to fulfill his agreement. A white light gradually lit up on his fingertip. In the next moment, the light expanded to cover the entire Tokyo area. It was like an inverted bowl covering the entire city of Tokyo. Within the area covered by the light, everything was melted by the high temperature of tens of thousands of degrees. Humans, animals, vehicles, buildings, and all the things that represented the existence of humans were wiped out in an instant. It was as if a place had been wiped off from the map. The area covered by the white light was controlled perfectly. With the entire Tokyo stronghold as the boundary, everything that went beyond this area would be unscathed, even if it was 1 centimeter away. Everything within the Tokyo stronghold was completely turned into scorched earth. 25 million people had lost their lives in an instant, and the world's most prosperous city had turned into a piece of white land. Countless people in the world looked at the huge fireball on their television screens, and all of them went into a frenzy. On the armored deck of an aircraft carrier floating in the Pacific Ocean, Li Onping was looking at the endless ocean with a calm expression. No one knew what he was thinking about. This was the temporary palace that Li Onping had built. It was also built to prevent the various influences in the world from being imbalanced. Otherwise, if he were to stay in any influence's headquarters, that influence would naturally become the target of public criticism. With the sea level below this aircraft carrier as the center, there were a total of 2 fleets following Li Onping's aircraft carrier within an area of 50 to 100 kilometers. This was to prevent Li Onping from harming others, as well as to prevent others from offending Li Onping. Ever since Li Onping announced that he would draw lots every 2 days and that the stronghold that was drawn would be personally destroyed by him the next day, the entire world had been seething with excitement. Such blatant acts of terror caused all the Earthlings who had just been rescued to hate Li Onping to the core. They also treated Li Onping as a demon lord through and through. After Li Onping broadcasted the entire process of Tokyo's destruction, the situation became even more turbulent and intense. There were protesting crowds and crazed demonstrators everywhere. On the day that Tokyo was destroyed, Li Onping became the greatest nightmare for all humans. The Hero Alliance and the Crimson Alliance, which represented humanity's strongest powers, came together to persuade Li Onping, but they were unable to succeed. They could only try their best to stop the crazed crowds from attacking Li Onping and prevent the situation from becoming worse. Many of their actions of currying favor with Li Onping were also seen by many as the actions of traitors and lackeys. Looking at Li Onping standing motionlessly on the aircraft carrier's armored deck, Black said a little disinterestedly, "Just kill him if you want to. Don't you find it troublesome to create such a realistic dream? Scanning the entire Earth's material data and then replicating it in a dream. To think that you can come up with something like that. Regardless of whether it's in terms of time or resources, the dream is more efficient." Li Onping said slowly, "In the dream, I can make 3 months pass by within 4 to 5 hours, greatly reducing the time I need to search for Regnos. This will allow me to have more time to prepare for my future operations. Moreover, compared to truly destroying the 32 bases, I only need to use all the aircraft carriers to continuously release simulated brainwaves of a specific frequency to maintain this dream. There will be accidents, right? Of course there will be accidents." Li Onping did not continue to explain. In fact, his body in the real world was operating at the speed of light almost every minute and every second, dealing with all sorts of unexpected situations. For example, accidental deaths caused by everyone's sleep, such as fires, floods, and gas explosions. There were also some people who accidentally woke up on their own, and some people who realized that they were in a dream. In the real world, Li Onping was dealing with all these things at the speed of light. Since Regnos has changed his body structure to be no different from a human's, then he'll definitely be pulled into this dream by me. His ability will allow him to reincarnate after death. Once he's in a city that's being attacked, he'll think that he's died and activate his reincarnation ability. And I only need to scan the physiological conditions of everyone in every city that's being attacked in the real world. Then I'll be able to find him at the instant he activates his ability. What Li Onping did not mention was that all this would be carried out without scanning the memories of all humans. This was equivalent to pulling all humans into a virtual online game. However, in this online game, there was no leveling up or fighting monsters. Everyone could only be constantly bullied by Li Onping. Chapter 438. This lunatic must be stopped. This was the thought of all humans after Li Onping destroyed Tokyo. However, the methods they came up with to stop him were different. Among the ordinary people, almost no one believed that Li Onping's real goal was to find some devil. Most people thought that his real goal was to kill humans, or that he treated humans like animals that could be slaughtered at will. Metal Man William Open Weibo. Although he was in the United States, he was the kind of person who used both Twitter and Weibo. When he wanted to see the public opinion of the Qi Nation, he would open Weibo. When he opened it, he found that the matter of Tokyo and Li Onping was already flooding the screen. There were comments everywhere like, "Don't cry in Japan, don't cry in Tokyo. Tonight we are all Japanese. Don't let the tragedy of Tokyo repeat itself. The murder must be brought to justice." However, the Red Alliance seemed to be afraid of offending Li Onping, so they blocked all mentions of Li Onping on the internet. Now, when the netizens of the Qi Nation discuss Li Onping, they would usually call him a butcher, an alien dog, and so on. William flipped through a few pages of Weibo and could basically see that, except for a few people who were gloating, most of the Qi Nation people were now unanimously targeting the culprit, Li Onping. But how long can this situation last? Metal Man William, or rather, the people in the League of Legends who had seen Li Onping move the moon with their own eyes, were the most opposed to using force against Li Onping. This was because they knew that it was impossible. The only effect might be to anger Li Onping and worsen the situation. Therefore, they had been trying to stop or delay Li Onping's massacre of the human strongholds. The most important goal was naturally to find the devil that Li Onping had mentioned. However, according to Li Onping, The devil had completely disguised himself as a human. Regardless of appearance or structure, he would not be any different from a human. This greatly increased the difficulty of finding him. Therefore, other than that, the superheroes also tried to use other methods to save the country. While William was watching the situation in the Chi Nation, the Twitter page flashed and Night Eagle Man's profile popped up. Have you heard? Those old guys in the White House want to pick a few women and send them over. A disdainful smile flashed across William's face as he placed his hands on the keyboard and began to type. Do aliens also like beautiful women on Earth? Those old fellows really think everyone is themselves. Although he said that, William also knew that sending beauties was the cheapest method. He hoped that after Li Onping slept with a few beauties, he would treat Earth as a second home. However, this was obviously wishful thinking and unrealistic. Until now, they were still unable to confirm whether the appearance that Li Onping currently displayed in front of them was his true appearance, or whether he had disguised himself as a human in order to confuse the Earthlings. Night Eagle Man's head lit up again. They've put in a lot of effort this time. They've chosen 2 women from America. Guess who they are? William was stunned. He thought that since Night Eagle Man asked him to guess who they were, he must know these 3 women. He thought about it and asked, are they 2 Hollywood stars? A celebrity? It's Amanda Fox. I heard that the group of old guys specially chose such a young girl. Hee, she's only 15 years old, and they're already sending her out. They're really enthusiastic about world peace. William could naturally hear the anger in Night Eagle Man's tone. Although the Amanda Fox that she was talking about was only 15 years old, she already had an impressive figure and a pure and sweet appearance. After acting as a supporting role in many youth movies, she shot to fame and became one of the female celebrities that American men wanted to get close to the most. Because Amanda was a guest in Washington before the end of the world, she was spared and did not fall into hell like many other beautiful stars. William remembered very clearly that Night Eagle Man used to like Amanda Fox very much. However, he did not say anything at this time, as it was equivalent to rubbing salt in the other party's wound. Night Eagle Man continued. The other one is a supermodel called Jessica Theron. I've seen her photo, and I can only say that I've never seen someone with such a hot body. In fact, this supermodel was also one of the top 10 sexy female stars in the world. It was just that Night Eagle Man did not pay attention to this aspect. As he spoke, Night Eagle Man also sent a photo to William. It was a woman with long brown hair and a height of more than 7 meters. She had big breasts, a perky butt, and a pair of round and slender legs. It could be said that she was the product of 2 extremes from the previous Amanda Fox. William replied, "Did you come here today just to talk to me about this?" At this moment, William's communicator rang. After he turned it on, Night Eagle Man's voice came from the other side. Obviously, he did not intend to talk business over the internet. Instead, he communicated through the encrypted satellite channel set by William to avoid the following content being monitored. Do you have any clues about finding the devil? No. William shook his head. Actually, Li Onping's current method is indeed very efficient for him. As the cities are destroyed one by one, there will be one where the devil can't help but jump out. But too many people will die in this process. If the devil doesn't appear until the 32nd city is destroyed, then humanity will be extinct. Night Eagle Man's tone was full of pessimism and confusion. However, what the 2 of them did not know was that their every move was in a dream, which meant that they were under Li Onping's surveillance. Black said curiously, "These 2 guys are a little strange." Yes. Li Onping nodded. He was still standing on the floating aircraft carrier, but the data about Metal Man William and Night Eagle Man Victor were still constantly sweeping in front of him. That William is fine. He just accidentally obtained the technology of another civilization, although the process was extremely coincidental. But this Victor is a little strange, Li Onping murmured. He's not a life born in this timeline. Every universe had its own timeline. The timeline kept forking with different probabilities and different choices. Every timeline that forked out was a new parallel world, and the collection of all timelines was the entire universe. and the multiverse was the collection of countless entire universes. Hearing Li Onping's words, Black said, "So he jumped timelines?" Li Onping did not say anything. Based on Victor's situation, he was the so-called time traveling. But time traveling was not turning back time. Theoretically speaking, turning back time was equivalent to cutting off all the forks in the timeline that the multiverse had developed before and returning everything to a node to start developing again. Not only did it turn back time in the entire universe, but it was also equivalent to destroying countless parallel worlds. And time traveling was just moving from one fork to the previous one, and then opening up a new timeline with the possibility of time traveling, which was also opening up a new parallel world. It was easy to distinguish which was difficult and which was easy. But although time traveling was countless times simpler than time traveling, it was definitely not something that Victor could easily achieve. Black said, "Maybe it's just a coincidence." Li Onping did not deny this point of view. Even if there is only a 1 in a billion chance that a person had coincidentally traveled through a space-time tunnel and opened up another timeline, there would definitely be such a timeline. Just then, the fleet on the sea contacted Li Onping. "Mr. Li Onping, the Crimson Alliance and the Hero Alliance have sent out 4 representatives. They wish to have a detailed discussion with you regarding the city destruction plan. They've sent you women." Black smiled coldly and said, "This is how humans are. They always place reproduction and reproduction in their hearts. This is the instinct that low-level animals like you have imprinted in your genes." Li Onping ignored him and only replied, "Got it. Let them come on the interceptor aircraft." A short moment later, an interceptor aircraft flew down from the aircraft carrier and landed on the sea. The 4 representatives from Earth sat on the interceptor aircraft and boarded Li Onping's floating palace with uneasy hearts. Chapter 439. There were a total of 4 women who stepped onto Li Onping's aircraft carrier. The 2 Caucasian women were Amanda Fox and Jessica Theron. Both of them were 1 in a million in terms of looks and figures, and they were considered the best in men's dreams. What was even rarer was that one of them was pure and sweet, while the other was bone-chilling. They had completely different styles. In the interceptor, Song Hai, the soldier in charge of escorting the 4 of them, swallowed his saliva. He did not dare to take another look at the 2 monsters who could bring disaster to the country. It was as if he was afraid that if Li Onping were to find out, he would be in deep trouble. After all, in the eyes of everyone on Earth, Li Onping had basically become a demon king, a godlike existence. Although there were a lot of people on the internet who wanted a crusade against him, there were not many who dared to do so in reality. He turned his head and quietly sized up the other 2 representatives from the Qi nation, who were also women. This glance made him blush and his heart beat faster, and he quickly looked away. The 2 women chosen by the Crimson Alliance this time were obviously the result of careful selection. Ever since they found out that the Americans were planning to use seduction, Yifeng did not think that a powerhouse like Li Onping could be successfully seduced. However, it was better to be safe than sorry, especially when he thought about how Qin Ning, Yang Dali, and Jiang Ao were unable to move when they saw the beauties. If Li Onping was the same, then the Qi nation would be in an extremely disadvantageous position in the future operation. Therefore, he personally selected 2 women to board the aircraft carrier together with Amanda Fox and Jessica Theron, who were sent by the United States. Of the 2 women, one had long black hair that draped over her shoulders and fair skin. Her figure did not look as hot as the 2 women in the United States, but her clothes were soft and delicate, and her shy appearance made her look like a doll. It was easy for men to feel protective towards her. The other woman was the opposite. Her facial features were exquisite, her lips were red, and her teeth were white. The confidence on her face seemed to be shining, and she looked like a beauty queen who had just won a competition. Although Song Hai had retracted his gaze, the appearance of the 4 peerless beauties kept replaying in his mind. Any one of them could be called a goddess, but now all of them appeared here for Li Onping's sake. At the thought of this, Song Hai looked up again, only to see four beautiful silhouettes slowly follow the directions of the mothership's indicator lights and disappear into the depths of the corridor. At the thought of the four beauties falling into the hands of Li Ping, and how they would be tortured by this demon king, this alien, Song Hai felt indignant. He wished he could rush up and save the four girls. But when he thought of how Li Ping had saved the world and the power he had used to destroy all of Tokyo, he became discouraged. He looked up and found that the other soldiers around him were also staring at the spot where the four of them had disappeared. They were filled with fear, resentment, and sympathy for Li Ping. Unfortunately, they could only slowly close the hatch and rush back to report to their superiors that they had completed the mission. The four girls walked quietly in the corridor of the mothership. As they walked, white indicator lights lit up on both sides of the corridor, leading them through a curved passage. These curved and narrow passageways were all designed for combat within the ship. Without special training, entering these passageways directly would definitely make one dizzy, not to mention combat. The four of them didn't speak along the way. They just walked quietly, their hearts filled with anxiety. Especially Amanda Fox. She was only a 15-year-old girl. Although she was an actress, how could she not be nervous when facing the legendary Demon King, Li Ping, an alien? She was the most nervous and afraid of the four of them. She held Jessica Theron's hand tightly and refused to let go. Jessica Theron, who was also from the United States, was better than her. She was a supermodel who had been popular for many years. She was experienced in dealing with power and money, as well as men who were greedy for her body. It was just that the target this time was an alien. However, she looked at Amanda, who was only 15 years old, and let out a sigh. In his heart, he was cursing those selected officials again and again. That bunch of fat pigs even sent out such a young girl in order to survive. Compared to Amanda's and Jessica's reactions, the two girls from the Crimson Alliance appeared to be in a different state. It was because they were not ordinary people to begin with. They were neither celebrities nor young models. They were members selected by Yi Feng from the Crimson Alliance. Li Ping looked at the four different girls in the corridor, and the information of the four naturally began to appear in his mind. This was almost a subconscious habit of his. At the same time he saw someone, he would have already gathered their information from various networks and databases. He had even scanned their brains. It could be said that he could really see through ordinary people with a single glance. The information of the two female members of the Crimson Alliance also became clear. The petite and sweet one, who looked like a young wife, was called Xiao Yu. The one with a slender figure and an aura filled with confidence was called Sun Qingqing. First was Xiao Yu's information. She was just a hothead who had just graduated from university. However, on her first day of work, she broke the company's president's laptop. He was the second young master of the Yang family empire, the president of the Tomorrow Corporation, and Xiao Yu's immediate superior. His domineering attitude, his doting, and his coldness were all like a thick color that barged into Xiao Yu's originally pale life. After reading Xiao Yu's information, Li Ping's face turned pale. It was clearly a very normal information, but he felt a little uncomfortable in his chest. However, he did not mind it and continued to look at the other girl's information. The heavens had given Sun Qingqing a chance to start over. This time around, she swore that she would work hard and become everyone's goddess. Every man who got close to her could not help but hold her beautiful hair and sniff it. Her snow-white skin was like the white snow of the Alps, making one unable to bear to touch it. Her body's fragrance always attracted the attention of bees and butterflies, making her feel very vexed. Sai, a young master from a wealthy family, a superstar, a prince from a foreign country. Why do all of you like me? I really don't want to date before I graduate from university. Phew! Li Ping exhaled deeply and closed the browsing of the four people's information. Black seemed to have sensed something and asked curiously, "What's wrong with you? I feel that your heartbeat has become a little faster." Logically speaking, at Li Ping's current level, every particle in his body was under his control. Whether it was blood, heartbeat, pulse, or any other body parameters, as long as he did not want to, there would definitely be no changes. Nothing, Li Onping said. It's just that the women they sent this time are a little out of my expectations. Black's curiosity was piqued. Out of your expectations? Then I'd like to see what kind of female they've chosen to offer to you. A few minutes later, Amanda, Jessica, Xiao Yu, and Sun Qingqing all walked into Li Onping's living room. This was a living room that Li Onping had personally remodeled. Originally, there was no such thing as a living room in the aircraft carrier. It was about 200 square meters in size and was completely empty. Apart from an office desk, there was nothing else. Huge floor-to-ceiling glass windows sat on both sides of the office. From there, one could clearly see the sea level hundreds of meters below the hull. However, the beautiful view of the sea couldn't change the tense emotions of the four of them. Amanda and Jessica held each other's hands and looked nervously at Li Onping, whose back was facing them. Rumors kept appearing in their minds. Rumors of the other party wantonly killing people, eating children, and torturing women to death. Clearly, Li Onping's actions of destroying Tokyo had caused many rumors about him to appear on the internet. Xiaoyu lowered her head and did not speak. However, when she felt Li Onping's gaze sweep past her, her entire face inexplicably turned red. No one knew what she was thinking. Sun Qingqing, on the other hand, looked at Li Onping without showing any signs of weakness. There seemed to be a judgmental and provocative gaze in her eyes. However, although the four beauties before him each had their own merits and could be said to be unrivaled beauties, which one of Li Onping's wives were not unrivaled beauties. Moreover, this was just a dream to begin with. Li Onping was not so thirsty to the extent that he would want women in his dreams. Therefore, he only threw a glance at the four of them and said, "Don't be nervous. I'm not interested in you guys." He paused for a moment, as if to let the four of them accept this information. Then he continued, "But since you're here, since I have nothing to do now, you guys can just chat with me." The content of Li Onping's words was a little unexpected, and it gave rise to different thoughts in the four people's hearts. Some were in disbelief, some were doubtful, and some were puzzled. Sun Qingqing was the first to speak. "Why did you kill so many people? Do you know how many people died in the explosion in Tokyo? Are the lives of humans so worthless in your eyes?" Li Onping took a look at the other party. Not only had he seen through the other party's entire body, but he had also seen through the listening device that was secretly installed on the other party's clothes. However, he did not expose these little tricks of the Earthlings. In fact, he also needed to spread out the attitude he was about to show through some channels. It would be best if his attitude toward humans could be passed on to Ryorno's ears. This was also one of the reasons why he wanted to chat with the four of them. There are many lives in the universe. The lives on your planet can't even be considered as a speck of dust when compared to the entire multivariate universe. Aboriginals, get your identities clear. You don't have the right to question me. Sun Qingqing was clearly infuriated by Li Onping's words. She wanted to say something more, but was stopped by Xiao Yu, not allowing her to continue. The orders they had received were to try their best to weaken Li Onping's attitude and stop him from causing more damage. They were not here to infuriate him. Although Amanda and Jessica were a little scared, they still remembered the instructions the government had given them. They were to completely obey all of Li Onping's orders, even if he asked them to take off their clothes and *CK him the moment they met. Or if he asked them to jump down from the aircraft carrier, they had to do it. Li Onping threw a glance at the two of them and asked, "Don't you have anything to say?" Amanda did not say a single word. She only looked at Li Onping in fear like a frightened deer. Jessica was braver and said, "Sir, the orders we received were to listen to all of your orders. No matter what you say, we have to do it." In the Crimson Alliance, Yi Feng, Yang Dali, and Qi Ning were all listening to the conversation coming from the aircraft carrier. As for Jiang Ao, ever since his battle with Li Onping the other day, he had left behind a letter saying that he was going into seclusion to cultivate. After that, he disappeared. Ever since Li Onping had come over to teach them a lesson, he had not had any actual contact with them. Usually, he would give orders through the artificial intelligence on the aircraft carrier. He was like a god looking down at them from the sky. This was not a good feeling, but there was nothing they could do about it. Right now, being able to have indirect contact with Li Onping through the two ladies was very useful to them. However, other than Yifeng, not everyone present thought this way. "Boss, what on earth are you thinking?" Hearing Sun Qingqing's voice through the communication device, Qin Ning said with a grim countenance, "You clearly know that I like Sun Qingqing, yet you're still giving her to that alien dog? You're letting him touch my women?" Yifeng frowned and said unhappily, "Look at what you're like now. Don't you have enough women? Don't think that I don't know that a guy hit on Sun Qingqing on the street last month, and you threw him into the East Ocean. Why are you so unambitious? Do you have your eyes on women?" Qin Ning's face flushed red. However, be it Yifeng or Li Onping, their fists were much harder than his. However, women were his reverse scale. Moreover, he had always treated Sun Qingqing as his possession. Now that she had been delivered to Li Onping's mouth, it was really hard for him to bear. Thinking of how Sun Qingqing was going to be ridden by Li Onping, he felt as if someone had stabbed him in the chest a few times. It was as if his wife had been snatched away. On the other side, Yang Dali was not very happy either. Xiao Yu and his second brother had always been on good terms. Now that Yifeng had delivered her to Li Onping, he was also a little unhappy. Yifeng looked at the two of them and sighed. However, he was thinking about how Li Onping would be drawing lots tomorrow. If Li Onping were to draw Beijing, what would they do? Chapter 440. On this night, the remaining 15 billion people on Earth stayed at home. Parents brought their children to sit on the sofa and watch television. Lovers hugged each other and looked at Li Onping on the screen. A lonely man lay on his bed and watched the live broadcast on his phone. At this moment, be it fear, anger, or resentment, everyone could only watch Li Onping's live broadcast quietly, waiting for the results of the draw. Life or death would be decided at this moment. On the screen, Li Onping was in the main hall of the floating aircraft carrier. Behind the floor-to-ceiling glass window was the scenery of the blue sea. A huge wall was next to Li Onping. After removing Tokyo, there were 31 strongholds' names on it. Amanda, Jessica, Xiao Yu, and Sun Qingqing wore bright blue hot pants and t-shirts, revealing their fair legs and belly buttons. They stood at the side, looking just like the hostesses at a lottery draw. However, the difference was that everyone hoped that they would be the one chosen during the lottery draw. Now, everyone hoped that someone else would be the one chosen. Then I won't say any more nonsense. Everything will proceed as usual. Li Onping stood at the side of the wheel, looked at Sun Qingqing, and said, "Why don't you draw?" "Me?" Sun Qingqing said in astonishment. In fact, although the four of them were used to being the center of attention, this was the first time that they were being watched by all the humans on Earth during a live broadcast. It was inevitable that they would feel very nervous. Now that she heard that Li Onping wanted her to draw, she felt even more uneasy. You draw." Sun Qingqing took a deep breath and slowly walked up to the wheel. The lives and deaths of several 10 million people were up to her to decide. This made her feel an indescribable pressure. With a swoosh, the wheel started to spin. Everyone in front of their televisions stared at the small ball on the wheel, waiting to see which stronghold the ball would stop at. Qing. The entire family of 3 generations stared at the screen. When they saw the small ball gradually stop spinning and land at the Qing's position, the old man clutched his chest, feeling as if he was going to faint. However, the ball still managed to cross over the heavy green with much difficulty and continued to jump to the next square. All the spectators in Chongqing City screamed. They felt as if they had just survived a disaster. It was a sleepless night for her. However, the people in the other stronghold on Earth were not as happy. Paris, the former fashion capital, had now become one of the largest slums in Europe after countless baptisms by the demons. The family of 3 watched the TV screen together, watching the ball slowly jump to Paris and finally stop moving. How is this possible? The mother stared at the television screen in disbelief. She hugged the child in her arms and began to sob. The child looked at his mother in confusion. He didn't know why his mother was crying. He then looked at his father beside him, only to find that his father was like a puppet, staring blankly at the television screen. There was not the slightest bit of anger in his eyes. On the street, a small beetle was shuttling through the traffic. The girl in the front passenger seat asked nervously, "How is it? How far is it?" "He'll come at noon tomorrow. We have to get out of here as soon as possible." "I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Drive faster." "Shut up." "I know," the man in the driver's seat shouted impatiently. His heart was also filled with anxiety. Although they rushed out the moment they saw the result of a lottery and planned to drive out of Paris, as time passed, there were more and more cars on the road. Their speed was getting slower and slower. The small beetle rushed out against the red light. However, as soon as it rushed out of the intersection, a huge container truck crashed into the small beetle that the man was driving. The truck then continued to rush forward without stopping. In the sky above Paris, a huge floating aircraft carrier was slowly moving. All kinds of warnings in French, English, Spanish, Chinese, Japanese, and other languages were constantly being broadcast. "All citizens, please stay in your homes. All traffic in the city is paralyzed. All citizens, please stay in your homes and cooperate with the government." Unfortunately, no matter what was broadcast, no one listened to them. There was even a small fire rising. On the top of a building, a burly man was carrying a rocket launcher and firing a rocket at the floating aircraft carrier. The rocket was cut into pieces by countless lasers before it could even get close. The burly man laughed wildly and raised his middle finger at the floating aircraft carrier. "Monster, I know you can see and hear. I just want to tell you, you can never control us. At least I can choose when and how to die." After saying that, he jumped down from the top of the 20-story building. At the border of the Paris stronghold, starting from the border, the 10-kilometer route was filled with countless cars. Everyone had to run out of their cars and rush to the border on foot. However, the people who had already reached the border had only despair in their eyes. The entire Paris had been covered by a layer of transparent and invisible force field. A blond man with a big nose slammed the transparent force field in front of him and shouted angrily. He had rushed to the border 10 minutes ago, but the invisible force field in front of him was like a natural mode, making him unable to cross it no matter how hard he tried. Just then, the sound of propellers was heard. The blond man looked back and saw a red and white helicopter rushing out of the border. Countless people on the ground reached out their hands and shouted. They hoped that the helicopter could bring them along. However, how could that be possible? The helicopter rushed out without stopping and crashed into the transparent force field. It turned into a ball of fire and fell down in the direction of the force field. In the end, the blond man could only see endless flames filling up his vision. In the city, there would be people jumping down from tall buildings from time to time. However, regardless of whether it was the police, the hospital, or anyone else, no one cared about such things. The police chief sat quietly on the sofa chair at the back of the office. There was a pistol placed on his desk. Sporadic gunshots could be heard coming from the corridor from time to time. Those were the sounds of police officers committing suicide. As a part of the government's violent organization, they were well aware of the methods used by Li Onping. The entire Paris, from the sky to the ground, had been covered by some unknown force field. Humanity's current technological means were unable to break through this layer of force field. The police chief touched the cross on his chest and prayed quietly. In the end, he sighed and said, "God, have you really given up on humanity?" With a bang, accompanied by smoke coming out from the muzzle of the gun, he collapsed onto his desk. With the results of a draw, the humans from the other 30 strongholds heaved a huge sigh of relief. The order in Paris had completely collapsed. As life came to an end and the entire city was about to be destroyed, the most ridiculous and crazy things in the world kept happening in Paris. A few hours later, on the floating aircraft carrier, Li Onping sat at his desk. There was a wall of televisions in front of his desk. Several tens of televisions were broadcasting news from all over the world. Amanda carefully brought a pot of tea to Li Onping. Then, her attention was attracted by the various news and live broadcasts on the wall of televisions. Behind Li Onping, Jessica Xiao Yu, and Sun Qingqing were also watching the various scenes on the wall of televisions in silence. In fact, Li Onping did not need to use such a backward method to obtain information. These televisions were just for the four women to pass the time. Just then, the hall's electronic door opened once again. This time around, a middle-aged man in a suit, an old man in a Taoist robe, an old man with a white beard in Catholic attire, and an old monk in a kasaya entered. They seemed to have sensed the astonished expressions of Amanda and the other three behind them, as well as the doubts in their hearts. Li Onping said to himself, "This is also the person that your government sent out. A negotiation expert, an old Taoist priest, an old charlatan, and an old monk. It seems that they want to win against me in terms of logic and philosophy, and make me give up on the plan through verbal communication. Greetings, benefactor." This poor monk pays his respects. The old monk was the first to bow while trembling. His benevolent and otherworldly appearance immediately gained Xiao Yu and Amanda's favorable impression. They could tell that he was a good person with one look. However, Li Onping waved his hand to stop them from speaking further. "I know all of your pasts, control your present, and can also predict your future. Your beliefs are meaningless to me. Your goal this time around will never be able to be realized." Li Onping then put out a finger. The way humans transmit information through their vocal cords is too slow. It's less than 1 kilobyte per second, and there are too many vague terms. There's no way to accurately describe anything in the universe. If I were to use my mouth to convince you, it'd waste too much of my time. At the next moment, a stream of white light shot out from Li Onping's fingertip, darting into the four people's bodies. The four people's gazes turned slack at the same time, and they fell to the ground together. Jessica and Sun Qingqing dashed over, wanting to support the four people who had fallen to the ground. Jessica bellowed furiously, "What did you do to them?" "Nothing much. I just let them see things that they've never been able to see in their entire lives." Li Onping lifted his chin with one hand, seemingly also looking curiously at the four people who had fallen to the ground. Suddenly, the old monk's eyes lost their luster, and he stopped breathing. Sun Qingqing shouted, "You killed him." "No, I didn't kill him. He chose to die," Li Onping said calmly. Or according to what they say, this can be called passing away. As the saying goes, if one hears the Tao in the morning, one can die in the evening without regrets. His body's lifespan had already reached its limit. And to him, I'm equivalent to the heavenly Tao, equivalent to Buddha, and equivalent to reincarnation. When I showed him the truth of this world, he had the thought of dying without regrets. The remaining three people had different degrees of personality breakdown, and they were sent out as vegetative people. Chapter 441. In the sky above Paris, Li Onping stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling glass window of the aircraft carrier, quietly looking at the land that was about to become hell. Sporadic gunshots rang out from time to time, and the streets were filled with abandoned vehicles. Most of the shops on the road had their windows and doors smashed open, and the items on the shelves were all in a mess. It was as if the entire city had been ransacked by bandits. In the corners of the city, in the buildings, and behind the windows, countless people hid in the shadows and quietly watched the aircraft carrier slowly drifting across the sky. Their eyes were filled with bone-deep hatred. However, it wasn't just people who were filled with hatred. There were also people who submitted. Around the Arc de Triomphe, hundreds of Parisians knelt down, facing the aircraft carrier that Li Onping was on, either kowtowing or praying. "God, forgive us for our sins. If you insist on sending down divine punishment, we're willing to accept it." An old man in a white robe stood up, holding a cross in one hand and a Bible in the other. He shouted, "Everyone, this is the test that the Lord has given us." With a bang, a few young men with crazed expressions rushed into the kneeling crowd with pistols, shooting at everyone they saw. Some of them even aimed their pistols at the aircraft carrier in the sky, pulling the trigger even though they knew that they wouldn't be able to hit it. Jessica, who was standing beside Li Onping, frowned and said, "They're killing your believers. Aren't you going to stop them?" Ever since the previous four representatives had died in front of her, she seemed to dislike Li Onping's actions more and more. After all, compared to the numbers in the news, the lives that had disappeared in front of her with her own eyes were more shocking. Your experience and the attitude you're showing now are rather surprising. Li Onping glanced at her. At this moment, the aircraft carrier passed by a huge lawn. Someone had used some unknown substance, paint or powder, to draw a picture on the lawn. It was an ugly face of Li Onping with a line of letters next to it, F*CKU. This was rather obvious. In fact, similar curses could be seen everywhere in the city of Paris, but they were not as obvious as this one. Is this what you want? The hatred that humans have for you? What are you going to gain from doing this? Li Onping's expression didn't change in the slightest. He only said with some deep meaning, "Ending is for a better beginning." 1 hour and 23 minutes later, the soaring white light drowned the whole of Paris, disintegrating everything into the most fundamental particles. Tens of millions of people died, and the hatred of the entire human world towards Li Onping grew stronger and stronger. That night, 6 soldiers and officers cooperated with each other to secretly activate their fighter jets and attack Li Onping's aircraft carrier. Although they were sent to the military court, a strong feeling of resistance gradually spread among all the human-controlled armies. London, Washington, Los Angeles, Berlin. One after another, large strongholds disappeared from Li Onping's hands. When Washington was destroyed, the League of Legends and the American Army suffered heavy casualties. As of now, there are only 25 large strongholds left on Earth. Hello? Ching Ching, are you free now? You want to take a bath? All right, you can take a bath first. Qin Ning hung up the phone, and his eyes were almost spitting fire. In the beginning, Sun Qingqing had some contact with Qin Ning because she wasn't restricted by Li Onping. However, in the past week, Sun Qingqing had started to ignore him. Every time he called, she would either take a bath, eat, or catch up on sleep. This be *TCH. Did she really get together with Li Onping? Although Sun Qingqing said that Li Onping didn't want her, Qin Ning always judged others by his own standards. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was impossible. Especially recently, Sun Qingqing's behavior made him more and more suspicious. He felt that Sun Qingqing had already gotten into Li Onping's bed. Perhaps when he hung up the phone, the two of them were rolling around in bed. Thinking of this, Qin Ning's palm slightly tightened, and the phone in his hand was crushed into pieces. No, I can't just let this go. Although he said this, when he thought of the strength Li Onping had displayed, Qin Ning felt that he couldn't resist at all. No matter how he thought about it, he felt that he could only let it go. He kicked open the door angrily. Qin Ning saw Yang Dali and Yifeng staring intently at the screen. Their faces were solemn and nervous, and the entire room seemed to be very heavy. Qin Ning had a bad premonition. He asked what's wrong. Yang Dali smiled bitterly and pointed at the screen. Qin Ning looked at the screen. Now, Li Onping, Amanda, and the other 3 were no longer on the live broadcast screen. There was only a huge turntable that announced the final result. At this moment, the small ball on the turntable was quietly stopping on the 2 words Beiping. Qin Ning's heart trembled. He said with a trembling voice, "They chose us." The floating aircraft carrier was slowly moving in the direction of Beiping. It was now late at night, and Amanda, Jessica, and the others had already gone to sleep. Only Li Onping stood quietly behind the glass window, looking at the sea on the horizon. Just then, the electronic door was opened, and a woman walked up behind Li Onping. Li Onping said, "You want me to change the target? I know that's impossible." Sun Qingqing's voice came from behind him. "But if I can use my body in exchange, I hope you can let a few people out." Li Onping turned around and saw that Sun Qingqing was completely naked. Her soft chest, flat stomach, and slender and beautiful legs were all on full display in front of Li Onping. "Actually, you don't have to do this." Sun Qingqing did not say anything. After interacting with Li Onping for the past few days, she understood Li Onping's power better. This was not a power that current humans could resist. Right now, her only bargaining chip was her body. She reached out and grabbed Li Onping's right hand. She placed Li Onping's right hand on her chest and squeezed it hard. Do you like it? If you like it, then take it. Sigh. Li Onping sighed. In the next second, Sun Qingqing felt a wave of dizziness and fainted on the ground. Li Onping did not even look at her and allowed her to lie naked on the ground. He slowly looked toward the land that was gradually appearing in the horizon. However, after a short while, Sun Qingqing's body was wrapped up by a blanket that appeared out of thin air. She was also placed on the office desk and fell into a deep sleep. Elsewhere, most of the Crimson Alliance's forces in Beiping had gathered under Yi Feng's leadership. In the past, due to the battle prowess Li Onping had displayed, none of them had dared to resist. However, now that it was a matter of life and death, and if they did not resist, they would die. Therefore, everyone was ready to go all out. At the borders of Beiping City, Yi Feng, Qin Ning, Yang Dali, and even Zhang Ao, who had been in seclusion for a very long time, appeared. There were also several tens of other members of the Crimson Alliance. Yi Feng said coldly, "We're unable to break through this force field. We can only wait here for Li Onping to arrive. After his aircraft carrier arrives, I'll use the lesser transference technique to move everyone in the formation into the aircraft carrier. When the time comes, we'll fight it out with him." Qin Ning gritted her teeth and said, "If we lose this time around, we won't even be able to keep our lives. Everyone, bring out your ultimate moves. This time around, it's not just for us. It's also for all the people from the Qi Nation, all the people from Earth, and all the humans. We must kill that alien dog." Everyone gave their promises loudly. A few hours later, the aircraft carrier appeared before everyone's vision. Yi Feng let out a bellow, and the formation under everyone's feet shone with a white light. Then, along with an intense wave of magic power, the space between everyone and the aircraft carrier was torn apart. In an instant, they disappeared and appeared in the hall where Li Onping was. The first person to dash out was Qin Ning. When he saw Sun Qingqing on the office table, who was wrapped in a blanket and revealing her fair and tender calves, his eyes turned red. Blood vessels filled his eyes, and platinum battle qi gushed out from the surface of his body. Ever since he was defeated by Li Onping, he had gained a lot of new comprehensions. Within a short period of time, his strength had gone up another level. However, he had only dashed out 10 meters when he felt an intense pain on his neck, and the feeling of suffocation kept coming. He could only watch as Li Onping grabbed his neck with one hand and pinched him up like he was pinching a little chick. Qin Ning struggled crazily and kept on punching and kicking at Li Onping. However, it was all to no avail. Li Onping looked at him coldly. Then, with a cracking sound, Qin Ning was pinched to death. Seeing how Qin Ning, who was definitely one of the top 4 experts, was so easily pinched to death by Li Onping, the remaining people also unleashed their strongest attacks amidst their terror. Yi Feng opened his mouth and spat out. His original treasure, the chaos bead that had brought him to Earth to be reborn, was spat out. Violent, immortal qi kept on spreading out, and this unprecedented treasure was about to explode. In Yang Dali's armor, 12 gravity bombs were counting down. Next to him, Zhang Ao's body kept on letting out explosive crackling sounds. He had already activated a mystic art that would damage himself to boost his potential. The other members of the Crimson Alliance also activated various ultimate skills. However, under their horrified gazes, the entire space seemed to have come to a standstill. Amidst this standstill, everyone's bodies were disintegrated into particles that were hard to be seen by the naked eye as Li Onping's gaze moved. 10,000 years of tough cultivation, 10,000 years of foundation. I can't accept this. I can't accept this. As Yi Feng bellowed furiously, his head exploded with a boom. How much money do you want? I'll give you money. I can give you anything you want. Please let me off. Yang Dali followed closely behind and exploded into countless particles with a boom. Li Onping, I, Zhang Ao, will never die. Every danger I face will only allow me to come across more miraculous encounters and become even stronger. Just you wait. I won't let you off." Amidst Jiang Ao's astonished expression, his head exploded with a bang. Sun Qingqing, who was on the office desk, had woken up long ago. She hugged her blanket tightly and looked at the massacre before her with a dumbfounded expression. 1 hour and 13 minutes later, the entire Beijing was enveloped in white light and high temperatures. However, this time around, Li Onping, who was outside the dreamland, opened his eyes. "They're here." Chapter 442. Ah! Qi Ning let out a cry of horror and sat up, looking at his hands and feet in a daze. "I didn't die." He looked to his side and realized that he was in the Crimson Alliance's meeting room. Next to him, Yi Feng, Yang Dali, and Jiang Ao all appeared to be terrified. Yi Feng was the first to react. It was a dream? He turned to look at the surroundings and asked the other three, "You guys were also killed by Li Onping in your dreams?" It seems that we had the same dream. Concurrently, all the humans on Earth woke up. However, most ordinary people only felt that they had had a very, very long nightmare and could not remember the contents of their dreams. Only a small portion of the experts in the Crimson Alliance or the League of Legends were able to remember the contents of their dreams due to their stronger spirit or consciousness. They remembered the terror brought about by Li Onping. This was clearly the case for Qin Ning and the other three. He could still remember how Sun Qingqing had been wrapped up in a blanket, lying naked on Li Onping's office desk. He remembered the fury in his chest, as well as how Li Onping had crushed him as if he was a little chick. Jiang Ao sensed his body at the first instant and realized that the light that Li Onping had given him was still in the depths of his heart. His face was covered in a layer of darkness once again. Yi Feng frowned and mumbled, "It should have started after everyone was rescued." Many clues flashed in his mind, and he deduced, it's probably because of those floating aircraft carriers. Just then, an extremely terrifying wave spread out from the north of northern Ping City. A pressure that was as deep as the abyss came down from the sky. Yi Feng and the other three felt as if they were toads that had been pressed down onto the ground by a palm, finding it hard to move. What's going on? Could it be Li Onping? With great difficulty, Yi Feng squeezed out a hint of spiritual power from the golden core in his body. The spiritual power flowed into the air and turned into a water mirror that appeared before the four of them. This water mirror technique directly traversed a distance of more than 10 kilometers, displaying the scene of the terrifying fluctuation in front of everyone. It was an endless stream of green light. Within the light, Li Onping's back view was like a pillar supporting the heavens, standing ramrod straight before everyone. However, in the next moment, the water mirror technique was unable to withstand the pressure brought about by the other party. Just a breath, an existence itself, a casual thought, or a gaze caused the water mirror technique to collapse in an instant. Yi Feng spat out a mouthful of blood as he stared at the spot where the water mirror technique had disappeared with a pale face. The other three were also like stray dogs, their minds constantly replaying the image of Li Onping's back. Is this his true strength? He actually didn't use his full strength in his battle with us. The other party merely revealed an aura that might or might not be his full strength, yet the three of them were unable to move, and Yi Feng, who was using spells to spy on them, was severely injured. Jiang Ao also stared fixedly at the northern part of Ping North City. The words that Li Onping had once said kept flashing in his mind. Is what he said true? Thinking of the light in his body, Jiang Ao's face turned even uglier. The first thing Metal Man William did when he woke up was to switch on his private satellite, as well as all of the remaining spy satellites and radars in the United States. He then started to scan for Li Onping's location. Fu's electronic voice rang out next to his ears. A huge energy reaction has been detected in Beiping. When he connected to the spy satellite above Beiping and clicked on the satellite image, he could only see endless green lights lighting up in the target area. Fu's warning voice rang out repeatedly next to his ears, super high energy reaction. Young master, this surge of energy is equivalent to the energy reaction of a star that has been burning for 1 million years. It's recommended that you take countermeasures as soon as possible. Just then, there seemed to be a flash of a gaze on the screen that was enveloped in green light. In the next moment, over 200 kilometers above Beiping, the satellite that William had connected to turned into a ball of flames and turned into ashes in an instant. Therefore, the screen before him also fell into a state of stillness. Fu's notification rang out once again. We've lost contact with the spy satellite. According to the observations of the other satellites, the spy satellite has been attacked by some unknown means and has disappeared. William looked at Beiping on the map with a grim countenance. In the next moment, he had already made a call to the Hexagon building. Hello, there's a super urgent situation in Beiping. Yes, it's just like what you saw. We need to send people over immediately. I'll be there in a while. In the next moment, a jet black fighter jet had already taken off from Chicago and headed in the direction of Beiping. 10 minutes ago, in Beiping, what appeared before Lianping was a baby who was crying loudly. A lady was carrying the baby, wanting to coax the baby to sleep. Then she saw Lianping appear along with a stream of white light. She had just reacted when she felt sleepy. Then she was pulled onto the bed by an invisible force and fell into a coma. The baby in her arms floated over to Lianping. Disguised as a baby? You've even sealed your own memories. It's true that it's impossible to find you using conventional methods. But other than stalling for time, what's the point of this? Even if I have to kill all the humans on this planet, I'll still be able to find you in the end. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Lianping's body emitted an astonishing white light. The white light was extremely piercing. Compared to the usual gentle sunlight, the white light emitted from Lianping's body was like a sharp sword that could pierce through everything. If an ordinary person were to glance at it, they would immediately become blind. It was the ultimate technique of the great dark sky, the radiant glass fire. 8 months ago, Lianping had already seen through the process of this ultimate technique circulation. However, he was still unable to unleash it freely. Right now, however, the powers he possessed allowed him to easily unleash this ability. Right now, Rioros, who had taken on the form of a baby and was unable to resist at all, became the best target. As the white light was emitted, the baby's body kept on changing. It was as if time had flowed back, and he once again took on Rioros' appearance. Then Rioros continued to degenerate, going from the 8th energy level to the 7th energy level, and then to the 6th energy level. Just as Lianping was performing the radiant glass fire to kill Rioros, clusters of green light suddenly filled up his surroundings. A strange voice that sounded like a man, a woman, an old man, and a child's voice entered his ears. The reason he's doing this is because he's not afraid that you'll kill everyone on Earth. Just 4-dimensional movement won't be able to stop his reincarnation ability from being activated. He set up the Blood River Formation. If you want to kill him, you'll probably have to destroy the entire solar system. Therefore, he hasn't gone all out to fight against you. He's only stalling for time. This way, he can wait for the evil god tribe's reinforcements and also accumulate powers through the Blood River Formation. Therefore, to him, the longer he drags on, the more beneficial it is for him. After knowing that you have compassion toward humans, he's even more certain of this. And to Rioros, whose lifespan is measured in units of 10,000 years, a battle of just a few years is nothing out of the ordinary. As he spoke, countless green light spots gathered together, turning into a green light sphere with a diameter of about 1 meter. The light sphere flashed, and Rioros was like an insect in amber. He was pulled into the center of the green light without any resistance and disappeared. This power! You're a demonic god as well? Looking at the light sphere before him, Lianping said solemnly, "Since when have demonic gods thought of protecting planets?" You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.